G'day folks, AoS Coach here, and we are talking all things Disciples of Tzeentch, depending on how you want to pronounce it. People always have a go at me saying, it's not Tzeentch, it's Tzeentch, whatever. We're talking about the Lord of Change, and I am here with a man who needs no introduction. It's Kaleb Walters, who won Nova Open, who's been on the channel in the past talking about Tzeentch. You went 8-0. Was it last weekend, the weekend before? It's pretty recently, but you went 8-0 with the Lord of Change himself, absolutely crushing the field. You have done incredibly well in the past. You're always at the top when it comes to like the LVO and some of the other major events. You're at the World Championships. As you are known as a bottom table bully. And we are going to talk about 4th edition, but introduce yourself to the folks. People know you. People know you. They buy your stuff from your Etsy store. This is a man who people know. For the one person who's just started Age of Sigmar, is like, who is this person? Introduce yourself to them.
Well, my name's Kaleb Walters. I live in the United States, the state of Maryland. I'm part of the gaming group, the Bottom Table Bullies. We play mostly on the East Coast, but I have been traveling around a little bit. Been playing Disciples of Tzeentch since the day it came out. Played old school fantasy, and just loving it. I, of course, just like Coach mentioned, I do have a Etsy store where I sell things online for the gaming community, and anything you need, you just hit me up and I'll take care of it.
Check it out. Does a lot of cool tokens. Does love your whiteboard. So tracking battle tactics and things like that. Really, really helpful. Go check it out. I'll grab the link and I'll put it in the description. Not that he's paying me for this, but genuinely, it's a really good product. If you're in America, people know who you are. Tzeentch Man, how are they going in 4th edition? They are someone, when I look at like the Warhammer stats, they are certainly one of the top performing armies. You're clearly leading the front. But let's rewind for a sec. How are you finding them and how are you feeling about them in 4th edition overall?
I mean, they're similar. They're a little different from 3rd edition. Thinking about it, I remember even having the conversation about Tzeentch and kind of my wishful thinking when I was at Worlds of, what I want Tzeentch to be in the new book. And I was kind of talking about a few things, and it's clearly, they already had that in mind. And some of the things I was thinking about is I was like, how cool would it be if the lore of Tzeentch, where the Lord of Change is, mutating everything around him, like it says in the lore, and it makes it where it's harder for people to hit you if they're around the Lord of Change. And what do? They put a radius of 12 inches -1 to hit, and I thought that was really cool. There's so many other small things we talked about, but moving from 3rd to 4th, how do I feel about it? I like it a lot, in regards to some of the mechanics of Tzeentch. I like how, the Karos is different than, what it was previously. I like how the Lord of Change is different from what it was previously. They're not the exact same, model, right? I like that a lot. I like some of the mechanics and how they reduced the range of flamers. I like how they kept the Skyfires longer. I mean, I like how they changed the whores and, some of the negative play experience of mutating into 50 models. They changed that, and that's, that was nice to see. So it's a lot less, of an issue, but still it's strong, right? Some of the things I guess I could say that I'm not the greatest fan of is the fact that we lost Coalition, right? A lot of list, manipulation, being able to take different parts and different armies from Slaves of Darkness and Slaanesh and Beast of Chaos and some of the allies. It feels like right now what I'm noticing overall in 4th edition comparatively with Tzeentch specifically is you're pigeonholed into certain list builds, right? Are you focusing more on Zangor builds? Are you focusing more on Flamer builds? Are you focusing now with Skyfires, right? And which list is the best list right now? It's one of those things where it's a lot less diversity. And I think that goes across all of 4th right now. But Tzeentch in specific, I do like. I do wish I had more spell casting. I find that only having 3 spells in a spell casting army, is a little tough. I know I have 2 lores, but 3 spells in general is not a lot. It becomes the same 3. But overall, I would say, it's good change. It's a change. Change is difficult. But of course, that's what we're all about, the Lord of Change, right? Everything's changing.
What's the quote? The only thing that's consistent in life is change.
It's strange.
But you're enjoying it. Like, I think
Yeah.
that's what I'm hearing from you. And you're right. Like, a lot of factions have changed, and some have changed harder than others, whether it's fundamental play style, critical rules. To your point, some of them that worked really well with allies and coalitions. Yes, you have the regiments of renown, but you can't really bring in, like, I think someone in Discord was talking to me the other day going, oh, can I bring in Archaon into Tzeentch? And I'm like, nah, you can't do that anymore. And I guess for some people that thematical I can bring in potentially. Well, you could bring him in. It's so long ago. Like,
Yes.
you could. It's
Yes.
been so long ago. I've forgotten what you could do in third.
Yeah. 2 out of every 4 models you could have made a Slaves of Darkness unit. And so you could have made him your, yeah.
I'm going back to my Khorne days going, yep, you could have Khorne and a bunch of Bloodthirsters and Archaon, or used to go back to Mr. Whippy Boy whipping Archaon as the general, as if he's going to cop that shit from a Bloodstoker.
Yeah.
But it's changed. It's different. I guess what I'd love to understand in this particular discussion is, how do I make the most of all of these changes that is happening, right? And, there's a lot of things, to your point, around, a lot of people are focusing on certain parts of the build, and I'd love to understand a little bit more from you in a second why you might focus in all on Zangor or all in the demon element, or, why would you do that as opposed to a mixed arms force that you might have seen in the past, where you've got a bunch of acolytes and you've got a bunch of Zangor here and you've got a bunch of demons here, and, you have a bit of a hodgepodge. But you're seeing that theme across the board as well with a lot of armies. They are building in, I don't know if it's smooth brain, really easy to pick up 4th edition. Is it the restrictions of regiment building these days, and how some heroes will only allow you to build certain units in certain regiments? I'll let you open up. Tell me more.
Yeah, I mean, when we're talking about list building and the way people are playing and what units they're picking and why, I think a lot of it comes down to, you have to find your play style, right? How do you play the game, right? How do you enjoy playing the game, right? Whether or not it's a tournament or friendly play, how do you enjoy it? Me personally, I'll just talk about myself. I enjoy a reactive play style. I don't have a plan in my head when I'm coming to a tournament. I'm not going to say, okay, this piece is going to do X and that piece is going to do, Y, and this is how I'm going to play. It's impossible to play like that. It's not impossible, it's just not the way I do it. I like to see kind of what my opponent does, and I react to it. And so I try to build a list that has that ability. I mentioned it too in the previous time we spoke. It's the Swiss Army knife of, playing games. And that's how I like to build a list. I want a list that can do a little bit of everything. A little bit of combat, a little bit of shooting, a little bit of magic, a little bit of defense, a little bit of buffering, whatever it might be. And I want something so no matter what my opponent does, I can react to it. And that's my play style. And when we talk about the list, we'll get into it. And so that's how you build a list, right? So if you're I'm going to go in there, I'm going to crush my opponent, and you want to play, the all Zangors teleporting, from the chapel on the table, and you're going to guarantee the 9-inch charge, and you're going to be on your opponent's side of the table and get all the buffs for your Zangors and all that attack, and that's the play style. Or maybe you want to play, the manifestation play style of taking bridges and putting bridges in front of terrain and creating buffer zones and funnels, and that's your play style. Or maybe you're the flamers and you're all about recursion and horrors, where you want to, you want to teleport your flamers up, do your 12-inch shot, stop them from doing command abilities so they can't, redeploy out of your 12-inch range, and you want to shoot them and let them kill you. But of course, you're going to be able to stand and shoot before they do it, and they're going to have your Lord of Change recursion you back on the table, and maybe that's your play style. Or you want to take all horrors and you want to just flood the table with as many models as possible, allow your opponent to hit you, they'll blow up, you'll come back and you'll recursion again. So I think people with Tzeentch, you do have a lot of avenues on how you can play, a lot of different types of lists. I've personally been focusing on one. I mentioned this to Coach. I just moved, so I haven't had a chance to look at every possible list out there. I have been messing around. I haven't told this to Coach yet, but I have been messing around with including a Gargant and still 2 units of 6 Skyfires and trying some different non-recursion list out. But Tzeentch is cool because you can play it so many different ways, and it's up to you and your play style.
Did you play a Gargant in third? I
I
remember either it was early fourth or late third. I remember talking to you about a Gargant in Tzeentch.
Well, I mean, the Gargant right now, he's pretty great because, you know, he has the ability of making you -1 to hit him, and with one of the family abilities, the Warp Flame, you can make somebody -1 to wound you, and you know, so he will kind of react with your army naturally, and you don't have a lot of models that are very powerful like a Gargant, and so by incorporating that one model, it kind of gives you something you're missing, a piece to the element. Like I said, something to do everything: magic, shooting, combat, defense, and it's nice to have that piece. So for anyone who's out there looking at Tzeentch, what I would personally recommend is, you know, put anything on the table, just anything, and see what you like. Do you like that defensive? Do you like the offensive? Do you like the recursion? And practice. And from there, you'll just fine tune. Almost keep a list of. I used to do this where I'd keep a list of what was the most effective in the game and what was the least effective, and I would play that same list again and again and again until I realized after like 5 or 6 games, okay, this unit has always been on the bottom of the effective list for me, right? Might not be the bottom list for somebody else because maybe Skyfires are good for me, but not maybe good for you because your play style is different. And so it's all about finding what works for you and then kind of incorporating that into your everyday list.
Well, yeah, really good advice. Like really good advice. Don't just keep chopping and changing constantly. Like it's about testing. It's seeing what a unit does on all of their various battle plans. You know, sometimes we use a unit and it doesn't work as well as we thought it would be, but then we learn a lesson and then use it differently, maybe more aggressively, more defensively, not deploying it on the line, you know, spending the command point for a certain ability, and all of a sudden it becomes better than the last experience. So actually not chucking it away was a blessing.
No, absolutely. I mean, I could tell you a story. First getting into Age of Sigmar, I played my buddy Brian, and this was back when the game first started. We just got points, and Stormcast was so abusive with all their dragons, those big dragons that can shoot D6 shots, do D3 mortal wounds across the table. They used to teleport their Dracoth right in front of you, 3 inches away, and guarantee a charge. And he crushed me every game. And I would just say,
do you remember pin and win? Do you remember 30 Liberator pin and win, where it's just like use a Knight of Zeros, pin, deploy into combat, like set up into combat, string out the coherency, and like using Mirror Shield and some stupid other abilities, you just sit there with no rend basically, because there was not a lot of rend 2 out there.
No,
it's like rend 1 idiots, 2 up armor saves going. This is the worst.
Yeah, you can't do it, but I say this to say that I lost so much against him, and I probably played in the course of a day like 6 games because he would kill me, re-rack, kill me, re-rack. But every time he killed me, I got a little bit more effective, a little bit more efficient. Even though his stuff I felt was way over the top. Like right now, we feel Night Haunt's a little strong. Keep practicing, keep playing, and one day you're gonna realize that you're beating Night Haunt at its best. And then when they get it with the nerf bat, what are you going to be doing? Right. And so it's that constant just keep pushing, keep plugging, see what works, change really, really small things, and don't make drastic changes unless you just absolutely need to. And that's for me has what's been so effective over the past, I don't know how many years. If you look at my list with Tzeentch, I keep playing the same list until it gets hit. When it gets hit, I make small adjustments and I keep going, and it's been effective. And it's just about fine tuning your motor skills and also the numbers. You know, if I get with 50 1 damage shots against this unit, what's the likelihood? Okay, I do need an all-out defense to keep them alive so I can rally next turn. Or no, I don't need to. I can save that command point because I'll still be able to rally, because even if you roll slightly above average, I'll still be good. And getting used to those numbers in your head will help you be more effective.
Write this down, folks. Like, write that down on a notepad, because one thing that I've absolutely always envied you and your brother, so your brother Scooter, the Iron Jaws player, is no matter how well or how terrible your factions are in the meta, you're always playing the same armies. Like, people have been saying pigs are terrible, yet your brother's doing really well with Iron Jaws, with pigs, and it's because you know your army. you know what its limitations, and you pilot it more effectively than your opponents. So there's a really good lesson in here, and I'd love to learn more about the lessons that you've found in 4th edition so far. And maybe I'll peel it back a little bit to 4th edition as a game in general, whether it is command abilities, size of objectives. You know, there's so many things that have changed, whether it's the CP limitations or the underdog mechanics, whether it is some of the clarity around abilities, or, you know, like whatever it is. Like, there's so many things out there that's changed. What's really worked for you, or what has been I don't know, a key moment that you've learned that you tell others to think about? Like, I guess I'm sandboxing here.
You're good. I mean, well, let's just look at 4th as a whole. It's a great game, right? I think we can all agree it's a great game. We might have arguments about this should count for more command points, this should count for less, we should tweak something slightly, but overall, it's a great game. And I love the mechanics of being able to do stuff in your turn, right? And not just stand there and watch you beat me or do whatever. I can interact with you during your turn, and you can interact with me on my turn. So as a whole, I think it's a really great, system they put together. In regards to, let's just, I guess, start with the top with, what have I personally found the most effective in the game of 4th edition, and what kind of advice I can give? To me, it's terrain, right? Terrain will make or break your game. And what do I mean by that? A lot of the terrain, you can't stand on top of certain terrain if it's an inch high. And looking at your terrain and kind of seeing how close it is to another terrain, and you can see, okay, you can't stand on either one of these points. And that's a 25-inch piece of area, and it only has a 7.5-inch gap, almost like the movie 300. You can put something strong just right there. It doesn't have to be a lot, and now they can't come through. And using terrain to your advantage, especially with the terrain you can't see through, right? And knowing that your opponent's playing a really heavy shooting army and they can't see you, right? And putting your models that you value in, obscure terrain. It's game changing, because if you can protect your units and still touch them and they can't touch you, you win, right? And so terrain as a whole, it's extremely important. And utilizing terrain and, and moving around terrain, I'd probably say is the number one mechanic a lot of people need to really focus on and practice and utilize. And I know it's all geometry, but making sure that arcs and lines are your models, one little, half an inch this way, now they can see your model with their whole army. If you just moved a half an inch over and now they can't see you at all, that's game changing, right? You just protected your whole, your best unit. Marathi no longer took 3 wounds that turn, whatever it might be. I mean, it's a flying monster, so you can still see it, but you see where I'm going with it.
We get it. We'll ignore the Marathi comment. Just pretend we snipped it. I didn't actually, but
no, you're good.
But you're right. Like, thinking, and I know some people are still learning how to use even like manifestations to be able to block off areas, right? Chuck on that big soul snare shackles, or grave tide, or something with a really large base. That 7 inches, when you've got 5 inches on making it up, like I have to measure it, but that can block off a serious area where you stop a charge because you can't land on that manifestation. I mean, you got combat zones and sling through it, but you can use terrain, manifestations, and other abilities to your advantage to block up the board, which probably plays well into your strengths as a faction, right? Because you don't have the fastest army. Yeah, you've got Zangors and you've got Screamers, but your army isn't the fast moving faction that some of the others are.
Yeah, I mean, kind of going back to what you said and encompassing it, knowing the base size of your opponents, and I know everyone, well, hopefully a lot of people know that you can charge over manifestations, you just can't end your movement on them. And knowing your opponent, how big their base is, and positioning your manifestations in such a way to where you're protecting yourself by being outside of 3 inches, but you're stopping your opponent from charging you with a free model that's currently right now. And of course, until they change the rules, right, everything can change. But right now, you can really be abusive with being able to cast a spell in your opponent's turn. And we are not the fastest, like you mentioned, with Tzeentch, right? And so, when we look at the actual 4th edition and knowing some of the strengths and weaknesses of Tzeentch, we have to look at the battle tactics. And if we talk about battle tactics and how important they are, It's knowing, what is your list of battle tactics? How are you going to incorporate your army and still able to achieve these battle tactics? Like, can you get the outskirts? Can you get the seize a center without dying? Can you teleport a unit on their side of the table? Did they leave a terrain piece open? And do they have any mechanics to where they can teleport something over there to stop you from getting it or move over there? And so, yeah, some of it is just kind of knowing what your opponent can do. And a lot of it is the battle tactics themselves and kind of building a list that can achieve such things. And I know we'll talk about, Karos and some of the things that he can do. But 4th edition, battle tactics are huge. Terrain is huge. Building a list in which can work with both and making sure you take key units that can effectively, cast the right spells and the right manifestations is huge. Thinking of other things in 4th, just to kind of touch on, since we're talking about 4th as a whole, the commands and the I don't know all the terms, I can't remember all the terms, but the shooting in your opponent's phase,
Cover fire.
covering fire, humongous, right? It is huge, and understanding, and it can be game changing. That one, command point, charging your opponent's churn, huge, especially if you're trying to get like a unit of 20 blue whores into something that they don't want to be in combat with. There's a lot. Of course, we have the same +1 defense, +1 attack, things like that. But I would say command points are humongous. Knowing when to use them, making sure you don't use too many too quickly, counting in your head during your opponent. If you went first, hypothetically, we'll talk about that. Knowing how many you can use in your turn and how many you're going to use in your opponent's turn, to where you don't underutilize your command points and you don't overutilize your command points. And really thinking about, do I need anything else? Do I need to power through or do I not? And so just kind of doing the calculations in your head while you're playing the game live with your opponent coming at you. So
I'm going to bring up the rules in a second, but I'm not going to let you walk away from this command conversation.
Okay.
First, cover fire. Why is it so important? Because when I talk to certain armies, like I did an Iron Jaws chat the other day. No, it was Sons. Was it Sons? I think it was Sons. I can't remember who I was talking to. The point was they just kept talking about power through. Power through was like the one ability. Oh, it was Sons. I was talking to Sons. They were just saying power through, power through, power through. I was saying magical intervention to get King Brod's prayer off constantly and going for that that boosted, was it 8 or 10? Like that CP is reserved. You talked to me about cover fire. As a Tzeentch player, tell me more about why that's important. And is it important to everybody, or is it only particular tools, whether it is? Yeah, tell me more.
I mean, well, first of all, you just named the top 3, right? So, casting spells, cover fire, and power through, I would say, are the top 3. And then, of course, certain armies charge, right? They're all really good.
And obviously, like all that attack, all that defense, we know that. We know what they do. We know when to play it. Let's put that to the side.
Well, so especially covering fire, right? So a lot of people are taking reinforced shooting units, and some shooting units are extremely powerful, right? But thinking about Tzeentch specifically, I like to take 6 Skyfires. A reinforced unit of 3 becomes 6. And when you put priority targets on one of them, it becomes very, very powerful. And, so priority targets gives you +1 to hit and wound against your opponent's general's regiment units, right? And the fact that Skyfires specifically do not suffer negatives to hit or negatives to wound, it becomes even more powerful, because the whole negative part of covering fire is your -1 to hit, and you're not suffering that. And also, if you happen to be the general's regiment against your opponent's general's regiment, it becomes even more powerful in Tzeentch, to where now your Skyfires, you have 2 shots each. You're hitting on 3s against your general's regiment, and you're wounding on 2s. Right? That's the best case scenario, but that is unbelievably powerful, because you're talking 12 to 13 shots. You're going to tell your opponent, take 8 saves, right? And your opponent's going to go 8 saves. You go, yeah, what's your save? And you say, I have a 4 up. Okay, well, now you have a 5 up, because you can't all out defense from covering fire. And so, I only protect on 5s. You go, okay, well, about 5 is going to go through, and that's 5d3 damage, which averages around 10. And I'll take a break right here to kind of talk about this. What is the average amount of wounds a army has? And this is something that I think about a lot. I don't really think about I just think about doing damage and killing models. Most people, I think, have between what I would say 120 and 140 wounds in army. Would you say that's about right?
I'd say somewhere between 90 and 120.
90 and 120. Okay, so let's say
Yeah,
the high.
because just because like right now what you're seeing is you're seeing a lot of armies building into elite, so they're having a much better armor save and there's
Yeah.
less wounds on the table. Armies on average have gotten a little smaller, but obviously there's test cases out there. Anyway, please continue.
So let's just say 90 to 120. Let's say 100 for simple math. If I'm able to do between 5 to 10 wounds in your turn and take out 5 to 10% of your army during your turn, and you have 5 turns. So we're talking a minimum of 25 to 50% of your army, if I wounded 10, is gone from one command point. And then we're talking about my turn. And that's just shooting. We're not talking about magic. We're not talking about combat. We're not talking about anything else. We're just talking about covering fire. And if I'm able to take 25% of your army away during your turn between all 5 rounds, yeah, that's a little strong, right? And that's why it's so important, because you're killing wounds. You're getting rid of people's full army, and so and it's one of those things you can also reposition, right? So covering fire, you can redeploy and still shoot, right? And so people try to get cheeky and they're like, okay, my one model's 10 inches away and my model I don't care if you kill is 6 inches away. So you're like, all right, well, let's redeploy and see what I roll. Shoot, I rolled a 4. There we go. Now I'm closer to the other side. I'm going to stand and shoot against them. It's dead. And now your other person you don't care about has a further charge to make. And it's there's a lot to it, and it's great.
Is that just a Skyfire thing, or are you thinking about other units that also have the shooting ability?
Well, I mean, no, I mean, flamers are almost just as good in my opinion, right? They're really great. You also have things like the Lord of Change. I can't tell you how many times I did covering fire with it, even though it normally hits on 3s on 3s, it became 4s on 3s. Just the fact, because I'm trying to do what we call warp flame, and we'll get into it as well. I'm trying to put warp flame on certain units, and sometimes I'll take that chance to possibly make you -1 to wound, especially if it's like a Gargant where I know Skyfires are not going to kill you. I might want to make you -1 to wound to where it's much harder for you to hurt me, right? Even though you mostly wound on 2s, making you go to wounding on 3s is a big deal, especially since a lot of models like Gargants, they don't have a lot of attacks, and making it to where you just fail as much as possible. So flamers, whores, I mean, I've literally covered fire with everything, so they're all important. But what is the best thing to cover fire with? You want to kill is Skyfires, in my opinion.
Yeah, it was more that was cover fire just really good with the Zangor side, or if I'm someone who's not running Zangors and I'm running Flamers or I'm running something else, Acolytes, Carrick Acolytes, whatever it might be, like, is that still true? And I think the answer is yes, but you're probably not getting the efficiencies as something like Skyfires, especially in the current season where we've got the priority targets. And it's interesting because everyone started talking about the +1 rend part of the General's Handbook, and now so many people are moving towards priority target, those reinforced Annihilators, reinforced Zangor, reinforced X, just to absolutely murder the General's regiment.
Yeah. Well, you said Acolytes. I would never covering fire with Acolytes ever.
Well,
But everything else.
But this was what I was trying to get out of you, right?
Yeah.
Like if I'm someone going, right, okay, I've got my old Tzeentch list from 3rd edition where I used to run 2 or 3 units of 10-man acolytes, should I be thinking of cover fire? And
Not with those
the
guys.
answer is, and that was what I was trying to get. Like, is it just a Zangor thing or is it everybody thing? But you've made some good points.
Yeah, horrors, Lord of Change, Skyfires, and Flamers, right? You're about doing damage, but not Acolytes. Not anything that has like 5 or 10 shots, and it's not going to add warp flame. But everything else, yes.
All right, I'm going to bring up the rules in a second, but while we're talking about command points, I can't not talk about magical intervention.
Mm-hmm.
Magic Army, Magic Command. You did mention half an hour ago, though, that you've lost spell casting. You're not throwing out as many spells. Obviously, your law's gotten smaller. You may have less wizards in your army, whatever it might be. How impactful is having that command point for magical intervention for you?
Well, I mean, I'll talk about 2 things, right? So, number 1, it's extremely important. I have never not once not cast this spell, even if I didn't need to. It's almost like you're going to a candy shop and you love everything. You're like, okay, do I want Grave Tide? Do I want Purple Sun? Do I want Shackles? Ooh, Maelstrom would be nice in my turn because I can move it and then blow it up. Ooh, that'd be nice. Ooh, -1 to wound there. Oh, teleport. Like you're in a candy shop, right? And so it's extremely important, right? And we can get into each individual spell and why it's important. But speaking about going back into the spells themselves, yes, we lost a lot in terms of damage spells. We used to have D6 mortals, right, which was huge. We used to have the Lord of Change used to roll 9 dice, and for every 3 was a mortal wound, and that was an average of 6 mortals, right? And you also had the Ogroid who had a D6 mortal wound spell on his war scroll, and you had so much damage from that. It was even worse in like 2nd edition. But now it becomes an unlimited spell that does D3 mortals. And you're like, okay, well, I only have 2 casters, so that's 2d3, that's nothing. But it does add Warp Flame. And then you have another spawn spell where it's much shorter range, 12 inches, and it does D3 mortals, but it can possibly create a spawn if you kill a model. But what they gave us was something I am blown away they gave us, which is what's really made a lot of my games. It's Fold the Reality, where it's a teleporting spell. And there's really no restrictions. And I'm just like, wow, that's amazing. Like, it's pick a unit wholly within 12 inches, teleport it anywhere on the table outside of 9 inches from your opponent, right? There is no, like, you can't be in combat. You can't, like, there's nothing. And so it's unbelievably powerful. It is literally game-changing for Tzeentch to have that one specific spell. And I wonder if they're going to change it because it is very powerful, but it's great.
Hopefully not for your case, but you just never know. So here's the rules. Let's maybe get into the weeds here, right? So first off, I'm not going to read this out. I hope by now Tzeentch people have looked at your rules. But talk to me about, let's say, for example, the Masters of Destiny. So I get my 9 Destiny dice that, has much changed here when it comes to the Master of Destiny. So you got your casting, unbinding, banishment, run. Could you ever do it on Dispel? Could you?
I believe in the past, yes.
Yeah.
In the past, it was like, and also the terminology, the end of the phase used to
Battle
be
Shock.
Battle Shock was one as well. And so they've changed quite a bit because a lot of the stuff you can't do in your opponent's turn. Like you can't do a charge in your opponent's turn, so you can't spend your 2 dice and guarantee the charge. They fixed a lot of that. And saves, they cleared up the rule where you can take negatives to saves. So there's no more unmodified. And I think they did a little bit of that in 3rd, and they really cleaned it up in 4th. But I'll say with this one Master Destiny, I feel like a lot of it is wasted because whenever you roll 9 dice, you're going to get a lot of 1s, 2s, and 3s, right? Half of them, right? And how many times do you want to replace a dice with a 3? Very, very seldom, right? Unless a spell goes off on a 6 and you have 2 3s and you're outside of 30 inches, you're never going to use your 3s. And so all your 3s, 2s, and 1s are pretty much wasted unless you're playing the recursion, and we can get into the War Scroll, the Lord of Change. But all your 4s, 5s, and 6s are good, and that should be the other, 4.5 of your dice, right? So you're normally playing with every game. You only get 4 to 5 dice on average that are effective, and you have to really pick and choose, as you can see on this list, of what you're going to use, because if it requires 2 dice, you have to use 2 Destiny dice to make that casting roll, that unbinding roll, that banishment rolls, whatever. And or of course you can use 1 for a run roll, which is nice, especially if you need a specific move to get to a objective. And so it's very similar to what it was, but it has changed quite a bit, and you find that you're not using nowhere near as many of your dice, and you always have leftovers at the end of the game.
How do you use your Destiny dice? Like, obviously, again, depends on how many you've got and the situation and blah, blah, blah. But are there particular bullet points here that, you will often put your Destiny dice into a casting roll? Or, are there particular things where I guess they're higher priority? Like, I think is probably what I'm trying to ask you.
In most of my games, I made sure I had one model, one like Karos. Let's put Karos at the very front of the deployment. to where you could dispel me and I could dispel you. And I normally would take my Lord of Change and I would put him further back to where you cannot dispel me. And the reason I did that is because of the teleporting mechanic, right? And so if I roll my 9 dice and I get 2 6s, a 5, a 4, and then a bunch of 3s, 2s, and 1s, I will make it to where I use my 3 and a 4 on my Lord of Change that you can't dispel to teleport Kairos on your side of the table next to maybe your terrain piece, knowing I'm going to get a free battle tactic, right? And at that point, now Kairos can cast his 3 spells, matching the lowest dice to the highest dice. And when we talk about 4th edition as a whole, everyone's ability to unbind my spells has diminished quite a bit. Even Nagash, does he have a bonus to dispel? Or excuse me, unbind? I don't think so. He gets +3. And if he's next to, there's nobody has really a bonus except I think Kairos, where he has +1.
Maybe
right?
the Luminarch, like Luminarch in Cities of Sigmar.
Yeah.
But basically, I remember doing a video trying to work out all of the pluses to cast and then pluses to unbind and banish. And there's really none. Like even your superheroes, like I run Marathi, for example, but bonus to casting, no bonus to unbinding. There's a lot of that, which is interesting.
Yeah. Exactly. So I'll use my Masters of Destiny, my Destiny dice, to guarantee a spell that's important, like a teleport spell, to get Kairos over there to get my first battle tactic, because I want to play more in a castle. And then I'll cast my 3 spells from Kairos and do maybe some damage, maybe some endless spells, maybe Maelstrom, what have you, on your side of the table, ready to do something to you, right? And then during my turn, I might take the 2 6s and make that go off on a 12 to teleport my Kairos back to a safe position. So I got my free battle tactic. I summoned a bunch on your side. I might have made a charge with my endless spells. I might have done some extra damage. I might have put, warp flame on, let's say, Marathi, and try to do some D3, cheeky wounds to her on my turn, and then just keep burning and burning and burning. And so I've used it a lot for the teleporting mechanic. I would say a lot. Some of the run rolls I've used a couple, but it's mostly spell casting, and I use it mostly on the first turn, right? I don't find myself holding on to them quite a bit because I'm just trying to set up the game and set up the flow of the game, and so mostly casting, I would say, and mostly for the teleporting.
And you made an interesting point as well, is that you're no longer holding, because we don't have the grand strategy anymore where you need to hold 9 points and then you get your auto tick. So use them and use them more frequently.
Yeah, use them however you want, right? Absolutely.
Speaking of burning, obviously the last 3 abilities here on your battle traits all tie into the burning. So your conflagration of Tzeentch, once per turn, pick an enemy unit that has any damage point allocated by a weird flame spell ability, and they're going to get the burning keyword.
Yeah. So that, first of all, we'll talk about burning as a whole. I thought it was awesome when I first saw it. I was like, okay, that makes up some of the damage that I'm missing from my spells. I'm going to put burning on stuff, and I'm going to get it back on the back end, kind of like Nurgle was doing. But what I found, and this is probably just me, and you could talk to all of my friends, I have rolled this like 20, 27, 30 times. I think I've got it off 3 times. I've rolled nothing but 1s and 2s. And it's at the point right now where I don't even roll burning. I just keep burning on you. I don't even try. I don't even pretend to roll it. I just keep it. And I almost feel like that's a better strategy. But yes, what I'll do in the game is I have these yellow rocks and I have red rocks. And every time I do a warp flame attack where I shoot somebody with warp flame or I cast a spell with warp flame, I'll put the orange tokens on everybody. And at the end of the shooting phase, I'll pick one of those units and I'll put the red stone on them. So I can kind of keep track of who has what targeted. In the beginning, I found myself trying to just memorize it. And my opponents would argue sometimes with me, like, you didn't do damage to him. Like, I did, and they're like, no. And it became kind of one of those feel bads when I'm like, I did. Here's the red stone. And so now I just started using orange and red to kind of help my opponent see what I'm doing and also help myself remember during the shooting phase. But it's an amazing ability. If it works the way it's supposed to, it's very strong also. I just have had a lot of bad luck rolling those 3 ups.
So now we've got the tokens on units that are being triggered by the weird flame spell. We then have 2 other rules, right? So at the end of the battle round, we roll a d3 for each burning enemy unit. On a 2 to a 3, you're going to inflict some mortal damage. On a roll of a 1, the burning is unburning. They're no longer burning.
Yeah.
Nice little passive. Kind of reminds me of the Nurgle disease, where it's just a little passive thing. It happens. If it doesn't, it doesn't. I guess it goes back to picking the unit that you want to increase the likelihood of burning, whether it's a hero and forcing them hopefully to, if they use rally, do they remove the token? Like, can you rally it off?
So quenching the flames is what you're referring to, right?
It's right there. Should read my own screen.
No, it's such a feel bad, and that's why people don't do it. Because what will happen? What you can do, if I know you're gonna just remove healing, like maybe you have a healing model that just heals, right? Maybe like Archeon, for instance, where Archeon's going to heal some way, somehow. What I'll do is I'll actually cast the burning spell on you to put Warp Flame on a model that's already burning. So when you heal him and you remove burning's re-added in the shooting phase again. Because you don't remove Warp Flame, you remove burning. Right. And so it's a good way to constantly keep models -1 to wound, which is the family we'll get into. But yeah, and to your point, if you at all heal or you try to rally and bring models back, it doesn't matter if you bring back 1,000,000 models, all you actually do is you remove burning.
Yeah, it's a must. It's not optional like in the past where you could choose A or B. Like I remember old disease, you could choose either to remove the disease token or heal. Now it's like, no, you've got to do this first.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great.
And also the fact that it happens in both shooting phases, which is nice. So it means, again, goes back to the importance of cover fire. Just keep triggering that and increasing those weird flame opportunities.
Yeah. One thing I see people online when they do battle reports, they make a mistake where every unit they shoot and cast damage, they add burning to each one. I'm like, no, it's just one. It's only one unit. You can't, the whole world is not on fire. Just one unit's on fire, and so the maximum amount you'll get in, the game is 10 units, maybe if you perfectly do it. And every, your phase, my phase, 10 is the most.
Yeah. No, look, we're all learning. Let's give the
I make mistakes too.
Let's give the battle report people some credit. Like I know, like you look at the chat, it's like, just chill out, guys. Like if you've played an error-free game of Warhammer, like
never,
you're a liar.
Never.
But what isn't a lie is the fact that we've got 4 battle formations. What are our favorites? How do you rank them in the current meta, or the way that you like to play? Are they all equal, or are there ones that are better than others?
I mean, me personally, I value what most people value the most. It's so obvious. I really wish they made all 4 great, but the Warp Flame, the Ward Flame host is the best, right? You're able to subtract 1 from wound rolls for attacks made with burning enemy units. And so if you add a regiment into your list, or you have, well, I guess there's only regiments, if somebody's burning, they're -1 to wound them too, because it just says if you're burning, you're -1 to wound, right? It's not saying if you hit a friendly model. So it's clearly the best one. From there, people will argue, and I personally, it depends on your list, right? And this is where the next 3 depend completely on your list. I don't value change host at all. I find that a nothing burger, list, because it requires a 3-up, and clearly with my rolls, I don't feel confident enough into getting that one. But I do see value in the other 2 if they happen to hit the Warp Flame with the nerf bad. And I do like the additional 3 rally a little bit more than the other one. I know people value the other one more, but I like the additional 3 dice to rally, especially if you're focusing on a Zangor heavy build. 2 wounds model, or even like Skyfires. I think they still have the war flock keyword. Having those extra dice can be the difference of getting it or not. From there, a lot of people, including myself, I still think the adding 1 to unbind rolls for friendly arcane units, the Arcanaut Cabal, is very strong. In addition, if you happen to unbind, you get to cast that magical, intervention for free, which will free up a command point, allowing you to possibly do power through, which is free damage. And again, like we talked about, the average wounds is 100 wounds. If we 100 to 120, it's just about doing damage. And anytime you're able to do something for free and still able to save something for later is very powerful. But right now, nothing compares to -1 to wound if you're burning.
Yeah, that is really good, and it's unconditional where I don't need to build into the Warflock. I don't need to build into the Arcanite. If I'm going heavy Arcanite, or even if I just have a little contingent, I actually don't mind the Arcanite Cabal, considering we just talked about the fact that there's not a lot of unbinding out there in the meta right now. So that can be quite well. But
Yeah,
I
no,
also
it can. It absolutely can be. It's
Yeah.
very strong. It's not as strong as others. You know, I like it. I just when you put them on a scale, which one's going to affect the game, you know, over the course, because you already are pretty good. You're better than everyone else, especially if you take Karos. Now, if you don't take Karos, Arcanite Cabal will give you that +1 unbind. But if you do take Karos, now you have +2. And that will kind of lean heavier into what you're able to do. But I already find you're so effective in spell casting, even against top-notch, casters. You're already doing very well. But it will put the scale heavier in your side if you happen to take it. My problem with it is you're having to lean into Arcanite heroes, and I don't find them to be that appealing. I find them to take up points and positions on your your stack of deployments and your units, and I don't like them as much as I like other choices. They're still okay. They're just not my cup of tea, but somebody will probably find them to be very useful.
Yeah. You've really got to lean into it. And I think one thing that maybe works in their favor is you've got those Arcanite Cabalists where, like, your Magister, was it your Ogoroi Thermitage, they can join eligible regiments
Curseling?
as it. Yeah, the Curselings one, the Change Caster's another one, and the Changeling. So they can join what is it, the Magister on disc. They can join the Magister on disc, then they can also join the Zangor Shaman. Long story short, you can reduce the drops, but basically your list is now being created for you, where what I'm hearing is, you want your Kairos, you want your Lord of Change, you might want 6 Zangor, and all of a sudden you're either being pulled 2 different ways or your list is being created for you. So I think for me, Weird Flame #1, it's just unrestrictive. And because you don't have the best armor saves in the world, the -1 to wound aura is that defensive piece that you really need.
Yeah. No, 100%. I have some of the worst armor saves in the game right now. It's interesting, right?
Yeah,
But yeah, absolutely.
it's not that great.
No.
What about your artifacts? Are there ones that stand out for you, or are they all kind of, again, equal? Or
I mean, of course, I in the beginning when I looked at it, I was like, ooh, Cult Demigod, like +3 if I roll doubles. I'm like, all right, well, how often is that going to happen? I'm like, let's play it. Again, this is part of what I mentioned earlier. Just take whatever you want to take and see how it works for you. And these are the small micro adjustments we're talking about, where we're like, okay, is Nexus of Fate going to be better for me as Cult or as the Illusionist? But for me, after practicing and playing, nothing compares to the Illusionist. It's subtract 1 from hit rolls for attacks that target friendly units while they are wholly within this unit's combat range. And from conversation that includes yourself, you're within your own combat range. And so if you have a Lord of Change who's already -1 to hit, if you're wholly within 12 inches of him, now he is -2 to hit. So even if somebody did all that attack, they're always -1. And that becomes very powerful, especially with the 14 wound, 5 up ward save model. And then all of a sudden, maybe you surround him with Skyfires. And now Skyfires are -1 to hit. And this is -1 to hit. This is not -1 to hit melee weapons. This is just -1 to hit. So this is shooting too, which makes it even more effective because you want to keep your Skyfires alive. So let's wrap him up. And your Skyfires are no slouch in combat either. And neither is a Lord of Change. He's not like super powerful. We all know that. But it's just enough to do the Skyfires shooting in your opponent's turn. It's enough to where they shoot you, they're -1 to hit. It's enough when they come in contact with you, your Skyfires are doing a good amount of damage. Plus, Lord of Change is going over that 3-inch and just going boop boop, right? And so it's very effective. So that one is definitely the one I would suggest for anyone who's looking to get the most powerful. Put it on your Lord of Change.
what about the Nexus of Fate? Because to me, you know, you just talked about the value of your destiny dice and how, you know, those 1, 2s, and 3s aren't nearly as valuable as they used to be in third. What about the opportunity for each turn to be able to go, right, well, I'm going to try to re-roll one of those dice to be a 4, 5, or a 6? Not that you're re-rolling, but you're replacing one of those 1, 2s, or 3s for something that's hopefully a 4 up.
So, I mean, you look at the averages. First, if it said in the hero phase, right, I would put a little bit more weight into it, but it's just your hero phase. So that's only 5 times you're rolling it. And, you know, the average of you're going to roll 2.5 high or 2.5 low. And so you're really only changing 2.5. And I don't know if 2 destiny dice in a course of a 5-round game is going to be more effective than, you know, protecting your centerpiece. And so I don't put nowhere near as much weight into that artifact over the other.
By the way, I wholeheartedly agree with you. A -1 aura on such a large base, and especially a nice little defensive piece. Yeah. For me, the illusionist is number 1. I'm trying to find ways where maybe it's not the auto pick, and it's hard to argue. Like the cult of the demagogue is like, I've got to rely on rolling 2 of the same dice, or yeah, I don't know.
I mean, it's, again, we're going to talk about it, but objectives are much smaller. So if I put my Lord of Change in the middle, well, that's 75% of that base. And then I surround it with 20 blue horrors around him. And now I'm like, all right, blue horrors are -2 to hit, right? Oh, and you're on fire, -2 to hit, and you're -1 to wound. And that's about, let's say 34 wounds you got to chew through. It's going to be tough, right? And you need that objective, and you're not going to get it.
Shooting's gotten smaller. The range has gotten shorter. Magic range has gotten shorter as well. Yeah, it's a great little defensive piece that, you know, Tzeentch as a faction probably has more linchpins than other armies, where you've got that 1 or 2, like protect the Lord of Change, protect Kairos, protect those little key pieces, because then your army starts to crumble. Some armies not as bad, but and certainly, like if you lost your Lord of Change, it's not the worst thing to ever happen. But it adds so much to your army. So protecting it.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I think it was game 3 at Nova on turn 2. Karos went into Archeon's sword, and I'm like, no shit. Good night, Karos. And I just picked up my Karos and I said, well, you're in the sword, buddy. And that's round, you know, it's about a round 2, right? And it was like, all right, and I, you know, still pulled it off, but you can lose these centerpieces, and I definitely took a gulp. I was like, all right, let's figure this out.
Yeah, that's brutal.
Yeah,
that's brutal. But it also shows that it, you know, your army doesn't completely crumble. It's not like Nagash, who's 1,000 points, basically. Yeah. What about your artifacts? How do we think about these? What, the nine-eyed tome, the ambition, and the weird flame blade?
I mean, for me, it's the 9-eyed tome. I mean, it's so obvious, you know. And I put it on my Lord as well, in my specific list, because he's naturally, you know, he needs the +1 to cast, because he no longer does what he used to do, which, you know, it was very powerful in the past, and pretty much always he used to match the lowest dice to the highest dice, and he no longer does that. And you have this 340 point model that rolls the same amount as a 100 point wizard now. You know, just 2d6. So having something that adds 1 to casting, and of course banishment, like that is humongous, because now I'm +1 to banish, and most endless spells go off on a 7, which is average, and now I can roll under average and still remove your manifestation with, you know, my Lord of Change. So by far 9, you know, I tome. In regards to the other ones, because I don't put as much. Of course, it's, you know, pick an enemy wizard in combat with this unit to be the target, inflict D3, you know, mortal wounds. Like if you're in combat with the character, you only have 2 or 3 characters. You're already playing wrong, in my opinion, unless I guess you go with the Lord of Change and you make him the combat Lord of Change. Maybe it might be something. You know, the other one, the Ward Flame Blade, if any damage points are allocated to an enemy unit, they have burning keyword. I mean, that's cool if you want to you really go hard in the burning mechanic. You know, it might be something else you might want to consider. But normally when you're putting this on a hero and you're trying to get into combat with your opponent, if they're on your side of the table and have worked their way through your front screen to get to your character, you're already probably behind. If you put your character up there, because the armor saves are no better than a 4+ at max, you're probably going to die against your opponent. So I think just staying safe with a 9-eyed tome is, in my way of thinking, is naturally the most effective.
Yeah, you could put it on the Curseling, who has a 3-up armor save.
Yeah.
But it's a move of 5, so getting it into combat,
He has
it's
like 5 or
hard.
6
Like,
wounds. He's going to die to a bunch of no range shots because he has such little wounds. Now, if he had like 15 wounds,
and that's the thing. Like, I'm sitting here trying to work out why I would take the Weird Flame Blade. If this was 3rd edition and I could take a second artifact, this would be great.
Yeah.
But as a first choice, I don't know if I want to put this on my Lord of Change. Maybe if I'm running double Lord of Change, but then again, there goes the argument, well, why aren't you running Kairos? And Kairos is probably better than having 2 Lords of Change as opposed to having 1 and 1. So it's a hard argument. I think it's clear as day. 9-eyed tome. Again, chat, you can tell me if you see differently, but I think again, this seems like it's a no competition. 9-eyed tomes is just superior right now, just with the meta and the options and the way Tzeentch plays into.
Yeah, absolutely.
There is probably something in the Weird Flame Blade, but it's probably a very specific build.
Yeah, and maybe if you're going all combat, it's still tough. It's, because all your small support characters have very low armor saves or very low wound counts. All your big guys, you're not trying to get them in combat at all, right? And so I don't see it. I've seen people argue with the Lord of Change with a baleful sword and try to make it more combat heavy, but even then, having 9-eyed tome on a combat guy becomes more of a multi-unit purpose combat and magic and shooting versus just leaning all into combat and trying to add burning. And normally you're already, if you want something burning, you can choose to make that unit burning by shooting at it, with the same model. So I don't see it.
It'd be cool if there was like a Zangor shaman, but was more of a combat guy, like less spellcasty, more of a general. But yeah, I think we're beating a dead horse. 9-eyed tome, 9-eyed tome. We tried, folks. I really tried, but
Give me a Sigvold. I don't know.
Like, give me something else. Give me like I don't know, an alternative sculpt for it. It's hard to justify. But we've got a choice now. We have 2. We are one of the few factions that has 2 spell laws to choose from. So this is the interesting one, because we've got the law of the fate, and we'll get into them all in a minute, and we've got the law of change. So maybe we'll talk a little bit about, do you have a preference? What's your preference first? And we'll start there.
Well, we only have 1 spell lore. I'll just say it like that. We have 1, and it's not this one. I'm gonna be so brutally honest. It is not this one.
Well, let's start here then. Let's start here. Why? State your case. Why is this? Because you got Infernal Gateway. Infernal Gateway was a very popular spell in the ye old days. Shield of Fate's not bad. A 5-up ward. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. Can you currently still put that ward on a Mega Gargant? Is that loophole been closed yet?
I've looked at this lore and I've tried to put it in perspective of what will be the most effective playing against all armies. There are good spells here, right? And we can go through each one. I mean, if we're talking about a glimpse of the future, it's an average roll of 7, and you're picking a friendly Disciples of Tzeentch wizard to make the spell, and you set aside any destiny dice that have a value of 6 and you re-roll them. And so you're just fishing for 6s, right? And it's not bad, especially since you can just try to keep getting 6s if that's what you're leaning in towards. Infernal Gateway, it's going to do damage, right? And you want damage, right? But the problem with it, it's a visible enemy unit within 12 inches of them. And that's the problem. It's the range is too short. It's the reason I don't like Flamers as much, and we can get into that. It's just the range is too short. You're a fragile army, and you're trying to put yourself within 12 inches. But if you normally what happens is somebody will hit you, like you'll get hit with 6 Vanguard Knights, and now they're within 12 inches of you, and now you can do this spell. But you're wasting an entire turn, the turn 1 of not casting any damage, and your opponent's 120 wounds, has not shrunk because you haven't done anything. But it's roll either 4 dice or the number of dice value, to your destiny dice, and every 4 does a mortal wound. And so you're talking about what, 4 or 5 mortals if you're within 12 inches. It's good, but you can only cast it 1 time, and it is a casting value of 6, so it is lower, so it's more reliable. I would call that kind of a lower to basic, spell. The other one, Shield of Fate, is much better, right? And so let's pick a friendly Disciples of Tzeentch, so you can't do the Gargant. Pick a friendly Disciples of Tzeentch wizard to cast a spell, and pick a visible friendly unit wholly within 18. So Gargants are friendly.
Correct. And, like if you bring in a mercenary, a regiment of renown, right now you can, unless there's an FAQ that I'm not thinking about that there is.
Yeah, no, it would still work. It's a great spell. A 5/0 board save. This is a good spell, right? I like it a lot, right? I wish it was. I would replace this spell with my spawn spell. I would, if I could mix and match, right? Pick 3 spells from 2 lores. I'd pick this spell, right?
Back to the candy store.
Candy store. If I could do that, right, that'd be great. But no, this is a good spell, but it's not good enough to pick this lore over the other lore. But it is a good defensive lore, and it does subtract 1 from hits. It's strong, and the range is good. 18 inches, wholly within 18 inches. That's a good part of the table. You can really, play around that. But no, I do like that spell.
Shield of Fate is the peanut M&M. That's delicious.
Yep.
But then in the bag, there's also like the crispy and the other crappy ones. Sorry if you like crispy M&Ms. I just think they're trash. Peanut M&M is OP. S tier is dark chocolate peanut M&M. So
I'm
a
big fan of
that.
Almond M&Ms, and I like the peanut butter sometimes. They have to be in the mood for peanut butter, but those are my 2 favorites.
Yeah, okay. Whenever I go to America, I always bring back like an industrial amount of M&Ms because you guys have so many different options. Like, I didn't know this was a thing. But
crazy.
Yeah, it's so good. Like I go to Kmart or Target, and I'm like, give me $100. I'll bring a whole suitcase just for M&Ms. We just got generic ones. All right, so this is the spell lore that you much prefer, right? Bolt of Tzeentch, Fold Reality, transformed into Spawn from the lore of Change, not the lore of Fate. Why is this superior? Knowing that we had like that Shield of Fate, which was pretty good, Infernal Gateway, which was decent. Tell me about this one.
Yeah, I mean, so the first one, Bolt of Tzeentch, it's a great spell. It's 18 inches. It's far, right? It's unlimited. It does D3 mortal wounds, right? And that's not a lot of wounds, but the thing on the bottom is it's unlimited, and it applies Ward Flame, right? And that allows you to make something -1 a wound with your family. And if you had multiple heroes, if you went into you wanted to maximize heroes, you can maximize heroes and maybe cast this 4 or 5 times, and that'd be pretty effective. And so I like it. It's unlimited. It does damage. It applies burning. It's good range. All around great. And it's a casting value of 6. Excellent, right? Transform into Spawn. It's something a lot of people value a lot. I value it a little bit because you have to pay for spawns. And I also value it a little bit because the way combat ranges work now, where everything's 3 inches. And with a pile-in, it makes it where a lot more units can hit that spawn. So yes, you can tie somebody for that 1 churn. And it's really effective, the spawn spell, in your opponent's churn, because now they can't charge you, especially against like Night Haunt or something of that nature that has a lot of single wound models. But the Transformer spawns cast of F7, so average. You can only cast it once, and you have to pick a friendly Disciples of Tzeentch wizard and a unit that's within 12 inches. So again, kind of a small range. They have to be really close to you, and you do D3 damage, and then you place a spawn in combat with that unit. It's very effective. You can kind of like, I am barely within 3 inches of this one model in the corner, and you can kind of pull units apart, especially if you're hitting them from one side and the spawns in the other, and you can really daisy chain them out. So it is a very effective spell. I just don't like the fact that I have to pay for spawns. And
that's what I was going to say. Like 60 points to have something in reserve for this ability. It doesn't feel right.
Yeah.
And
they're not good. The spawns aren't good. Like, they're not strong. They don't hit hard. I think they have crit 2 hits, but there's like 4s on 4s, no ren, 1 damage with 5 wounds. Now, if we're talking 3rd edition, they're amazing. You cast a
Yeah.
spell, they heal all their wounds. I'm like, okay, that's pretty awesome. And they do mortals on 6s in 3rd edition. They were effective back then, but right now it's more of a gimmick thing that it can be effective. I do like it. I'm not crazy about it because you have to pay points for it. Now, if I had 60 points to spare, hells yes, I'm putting a spawn in there because it will come up in 2, maybe 3 of my games. It will be effective at some point. But going to my favorite spell, I already mentioned it earlier. It is definitely Fold the Reality, right? It's a casting value of 7, and you're picking a wizard and a unit wholly within 12 inches, and you're literally removing that target from the battlefield and setting up again on the battlefield more than 9 inches away from enemy units. You're grabbing terrain, you're seizing the center. Yeah, you can't do the table sides because you can't be set up, but you're so effective. If you're in combat and you don't want to be in combat, you're no longer in combat. You're no longer taking the D3, mortals to retreat. You're just, whoop, you're moving. And it's extremely impactful. I have won games. I have lost games by filling the spell. But it's your best spell in this book by far.
I agree wholeheartedly. I will say, Games Workshop, if you're listening to this, or I know you are, my counter offer to you is that if you're taking if I'm taking the Tzeentch manifestation law, I should get spawns for free. Only if I take the Tzeentch manifestation law. If I go Morbid Conjuration or something universal, no free for you, pay you 60 points. But I reckon this should be like a manifestation. That's my counter. There's my counter. Boost those sales for spawns, boost those sales for endless spells, and yeah, it's definitely clear as day. Change is stronger unless you've got a particular playstyle, and the fact that there's a weird flame in the Law of Fate. Like if there was a keyworded spell that gave you was it Infernal Gateway that was, yeah, if Infernal Gateway offered you Weird Flame as well, at least you've got an option to play into that with this spell law. But it's like these 3 are really good. One plays into your faction abilities. There's 3 abilities that are tied into Weird Flame.
Yeah, I mean, I would, if Infernal Gateway was actually what the Lord of Change's spell was, which was roll 9 dice and for every 3 was a mortal wound, I could actually see myself picking that because then you have a defensive, spell and an offensive spell and then a nothing burger spell. And versus then you going into more damage heavy versus utility. And I find utility in the teleporting to be more effective than the utility in the other one.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. There's just too many good reasons I could use those. I would be going change every day of the week. One thing that maybe I'm not seeing enough of is the manifestations of Tzeentch. So I know that you are a fan of Morbid Conjuration, as is a lot of people. And if you don't take Morbid Conjuration, Cronspine and or Primal are certainly some of the more popular of the builds. But let's live in a world where maybe some of these universal ones, like Morbid, have been reined in a little bit. I don't know what it looks like, but let's assume it's not as powerful as it is today. How do you see this manifestation law in general? Like, is it decent? Is it trash? How do you see this?
Unfortunately, it's trash. It's just
Why?
unfortunate.
Why?
I mean, well, let's look at the other ones, right? Just on a surface, yes, we all agree the scary one's the one I take, right? And let's just get rid of that one. Let's throw it out. Then
we know it's good. We know it's good, right? So between now and Nerf, enjoy Morbid, enjoy Primal, enjoy Cronspine, do it.
Yeah, I mean, even I would take the bridge one over this one in a heartbeat, right? And if we're just looking at this as a whole, what are you getting? I mean, Demonic Simulacrum, it's nice, and of course, if you play against Nagash, it's scary for him, but it's good. 4 attacks hitting on 4s, you're only hitting twice. Wounding on 3s, you're going to miss one of those. So you're going to have 1 attack that goes through on average with 1 rend doing D3. That's your damage one. You have the one in the middle, Burning Sigil. I really miss the old one. this is random. You have no control over it. And somebody like myself, while I kind of like to know what's going to happen in the game and the whole idea of knowing the future and the past, I don't know anything. Right? I can't determine it. It's not my play style. It's very random. And the other one, pluses to cast. I feel like I already have quite a bit of pluses to cast, especially with Karos matching the lowest to the highest, and my offering a +1 to cast on top of that with Wholly Within 12 inches. And of course, my artifact that's giving me +1 to cast for my Lord of Change. And then, of course, on the terrain, you can get +1 to cast on a 2-up as well. I don't need more of that. There's so many other endless spells that offer so much more utility, and these are all small. They're not covering big parts of the land, like I mentioned earlier, using the terrain effectively and putting something in the middle. This is not going to do that. No matter what they do, unless they completely get rid of all the other ones, would I ever pick this one? And it's unfortunate because I have a lot of beautifully painted, ones here, and I do like my Tzeentch, and maybe when they come out with their new book, if GW's listening, you have to make it effective, and it has to, has to tie into the lore, right? And again, I would agree with you. Even if it offered a 60-point spawn, I don't know if I would take it, right? It's you can give me 4 spawns for free. I don't think I would take it even if you gave me 240 points worth of free spawns. It's not effective in the game, and that's probably why they haven't sold as much of these recently. But I like the other one so much more.
I feel like this is just not doing anything for me. Like I would take the chronomatic cogs before like the Aether wrought machineries. I would take, the primal for, some combat threats and a healing ability to my Lord of Change. Like, moving Morbid aside, I look at these 3. Okay, let's assume Morbid is just gone, right? I've only got the other universals. I almost feel like all of them stand out stronger. I want Pendulum, I want Cogs, I want Bridge, I want like Life Swarm, I want the Jaws. Like I look at this and go, I don't like, these are all nice to have, but it's not my pick.
Yeah, I mean, if they made it to where all the other manifestations costed points and these were free, maybe, right? If that was what they did, they're like, all right, faction endless spells are free. These you have to pay for, and they're going to be 200 points for this one, 100 points, whatever. I might take these, especially if I'm trying to accomplish something. But it's a single endless spell like an incarnate would be more effective than these.
Yeah. Like the Simulacrum is fine, but like if I'm only going to use one endless spell, and let's say it's a Simulacrum, right? It's the one that I'm going to use the most. To your point, am I better off just doing a Kronspine, who's also anti-wizard, who also has more wounds, who also can not be immediately unbound, who is taking up more board space with that large base? It's a hard argument towards the Simulacrum, because even one manifestation with Kronspine is just better.
Yeah, Kronspine's doing an average of what, six damage? Because he has 6 attacks and hits half and wounds 2. He's going to do about 6, and that's
Eats
more
endless
effective.
spells.
Yeah,
Eats endless spells that you don't have to be unbinding or banishing with your own rolls. Like it's just, it's a hard. I would need to see a rewrite on those manifestations, because it's a really, again, if someone smarter in the room is using this and doing very well, I'd love to hear it. But it's hard to justify, even if I'm assuming we live in a world of nerfs. It just nothing titillates me.
Yeah, I agree.
But let's talk about some other titillations. Let's talk some favorite units, and then I want to get into your list. We've talked a lot about Kairos, so I'd love to hear a bit more about some of your favorites. But let's start with Kairos. How much do we like him, and is it an auto include in a Tzeentch army?
I mean, nothing's throughout time. Right now, I feel like he's an auto include, right? But over time, he might not be, because the reason right now he is. I mean, you look at his war scroll. Start from the top to the bottom. He's fast. His control's good. His health is good. His save's bad. Combat damage wise, he's pretty good. He's not going to kill any, Varan card, but he's going to take care of some smaller units, and he's going to put some work on some medium units, right? When you look at his battle trait, when he takes too much damage, it's not affecting him too much. When you go to his next passive, Masters of Magic, it's the best thing in the entire game. When you match the lowest dice with the highest dice, you're going to be like, every spell's going off an 11 or a 13. It's insane. And the reason it's happening is because his other passive, which is add 1 to casting rolls and unbinding rolls for friendly Disciples of Tzeentch wizards while they are wholly within 12 inches. So it's matching the lowest to highest +1. And then they took my favorite spell in the entire 3rd edition, my favorite one, and they gave it to just him. And I'm like, well, that's going to be what I take, because it's just the most amazing spell ever. And what it does, in case you haven't really looked at it, it's three spells in one, right? And you get a pick, and that's the Swiss Army knife approach, right? Where the first one that's probably the most effective is it's hopeless. You have no command abilities, none. And we talked earlier about how effective command abilities are. This is game changing, where you're literally like, all right, I'm going to teleport Kairos on your side of the table. I'm going to say no command, so you can't countercharge me, or I'm doing it against your shooting unit that's going to about to light me up on fire. I'm going to say no commands because you can't shoot me now. And now I'm going to do, this spell, and it's crazy, right? Another one that's extremely strong. And again, if you look here, it says until your next turn, right? So that's really great. Next one is drop your weapons, which is subtract 1 from hit rolls and wound rolls. And when you incorporate Warp Flame, especially if you know like a unit has +1 to wound, you're like, all right, I'm going to do -1 to hit and wound. And that way you are -2 to wound because you have fire on you. And you're going to be -1 to hit Kairos, because you're wholly within 12 inches of the Lord. It's stacking things on top of each other, making it much harder for units to hit. And when we look at some armies like Orcs, I kind of make fun of my brother. I go, ha, you hit on 4s. Now you're always hitting on 5s. And he's just like ready to fume and kill me, but it's insane what some armies have gained. Trolls.
Wait, do it on a Gargan army. When you
Yeah.
start applying, Gargans hate debuffs, and nothing is worse when I'm start like hitting on 5s or like wounding on something ridiculous. Like, it's the worst ever. And that's where the defense comes in from Tzeentch, right? It's not necessarily your armor save, it's your debuffs and the shenanigans like no commands.
Absolutely. Right. And the last one is more of a circumstantial one. And that's if your opponent doesn't have command points, where I'll do the last one, which is kneel, where I'll subtract 1 from their save rolls. Because if you have no command points, you can't redeploy, you can't all out defense. And now my -1 ran weapons are now -2, which is the one thing I'm lacking. And this really helps out. So that becomes more situational if you want to use that one, subtract 1 from save rolls. And then, of course, you have probably the most broken thing in the game, in my personal opinion, and that is the once per battle reaction, where I can pick the exact same battle tactic that I've already completed, or I can pick 2 battle tactics and try to complete one of them, and a second one does not count it as being attempted. Very, very strong, especially when you're talking about, hey, I took your land over here, and I don't think I can accomplish any other battle tactics, so I'm going to take your land again, right? I'm just going to do it twice, right? And that's almost 50% of the game. I just got, free battle tactics, and you can't do anything about it. And then now I'm going to do the flanks and the center and kill a unit, and I got all 5, right? And so it's ridiculously powerful. And that's why with the attacking ability, with the magic ability, with the incredible spell, with the completing 2 battle tactics, oh yeah, we're going to include him. And you got to look at him past the War Scroll and look at manifestations. If you notice, he is a War Master, but he's a Wizard 3, which means he can currently right now, which I disagree with, he can cast 3 manifestations. I personally think they should switch it to only 1 Wizard, 1 manifestation, but right now he can cast all 3. So his strength now goes into, okay, my first spell is going to be Maelstrom, 1 pip. Second spell is going to go into Gravetide, 2 pips. Third spell is going to go into Purple Sun, 3 pips. Your turn, I'm charging all 3 into you. I'm pipped out maximum, I'm ready to rock and roll, and I'm not going to use my Maelstrom yet, right? And so his value comes from so much because the manifestations are free right now, and his ability, and that's for the whole game, right? He also flies. He also has a 5-up ward save, so now he has a 5-up old school Nurgle. He's amazing. And I think he's pointed very well. I think he's very strong. He's probably one of my favorite pieces. And when he was put in the sword, I did get a little tear. Yeah, no, he's great.
It's a great scroll. It's a really good scroll. Yeah, for everything you've just said, like I got nothing else to add. I mean, I run around with Krondus in my army, this mobile wizard with a bunch of debuffs, and I absolutely love Krondus. the Arcane Suggestion is absolutely no different. The battle tactic ability is so good because, to your point, we try to save things like take their land till the very end, but now I don't have to be as passive, right? Or if I've got something turn 1 and I've gone take the flanks, I could literally leave those units on the flanks and score it again. Like, there's just so much flexibility while the rest of your force does its thing. So for me, great war scroll. Hopefully wouldn't go any higher. 440 is already quite expensive when you start adding in some of the other units, but it's a good war scroll.
Absolutely.
And then when you add the Lord of Change, and now we're at what, 800 for the pair if you happen to run double bird.
780.
Yeah, I'm just 800.
Sorry,
just...
800. So 800.
So maybe before we talk about the Lord of Change, do you run both, or
yes.
do you think one is enough? Like, whichever one.
Well, it depends on your list. So, like, if you're leaning into no demons, I think Kairos is enough, right? If you're going Zangor heavy, Skyfire heavy, maybe throwing Regiments of Renown. I saw an Honest Wargamer talking about the Nurgle one. Maybe you want to lean into more combat and that kind of avenue, just do Kairos, right? But if you want to incorporate demons, that's when the Lord of Change, his value goes up quite a bit. And I know a lot of people are kind of trashing him in the beginning. I look at things slightly differently, especially with his ability of recursion. But his war scroll and his points cost, I think, is phenomenal. And I'll just talk about, I guess,
360 right now, which is quite solid.
Yeah.
It's very, very generous.
Yeah. And so, again, his profile, 12-inch move, he's fast, 14 health, it's good. Control 5's awesome. 5-up save, not so great. His Rod of Sorcery is my personal favorite because it has the Ward Flame ability. I get to pick a unit and go, you're going to burn this turn, right? He's good. He's decent against wizards with his +1 rend on that weapon. You have to pick between the Rod of Sorcery or the Baleful Sword. I personally think the mobile castle's better than putting him in danger zone because you're trying to protect your stuff, but everyone has their own play style.
Agreed. I agree, by the way. I think getting the Lord of Change in combat is a last resort. Yeah. And which goes back to the artifact of why I wouldn't want to take the weapon, because I'd rather the rod. Just use other things to block it at the board.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. And his passive is amazing. It's like literally the most amazing, because we used to have a heroic trait, which is just -1 to hit characters and demon units. And now they expanded it to units now instead of just the characters. And I like that a lot, right? And so it's a 12-inch bubble that wraps around him, affecting demon units, and I think it's great. And then, of course, his little 3-inch one now affects Arcanites and Flocks and stuff like that, which is great as well. So huge passive there. His spell, I'm not a crazy about a spell. I'll cast it if I have nothing else to cast, because it's I'm getting 1 6 or 2 6s, but what it does is it's a good range, 18 inches. It's roll 9 dice, and for every 6 does D3 mortal wounds. I have spiked it before. I rolled like 5 6s, and I was like, hold on, let me take a picture of this real quick. I'm gonna show my brother. I've done things like that, but mostly it's 1, maybe 2 6s. But the reason you should take him is the fact that he has his once per turn summon demons of Tzeentch, right? And the fact that it's guaranteed. Discard 1 destiny dice. And what do we not use? We don't use half the destiny dice. So you're not using 4 to 5 of your destiny dice anyways. 1s are literally worthless because you can't use them on Battle Shock. 2s are worthless because most things don't, affect on 2s. Nothing on his War Scroll hits on a 2 or wounds on a 2. And so 1s and 2s are always going to be put aside for summoning back your demons, and it's guaranteed. And it's huge. And you got to look at the value. If you took a reinforced pink unit, which is 280 points, you bring back 10 of those, which is 140 points. Well, let's subtract 140 points from his War Scroll. Now what does it cost? 220, right? Okay, well, let's do it again. Let's take out, unit 20 Blue Horse and bring back 10. Well, and that's 120 points. So now his War Scroll's 200 or whatever it is. It becomes, now you have this, 200-point character who's a 5 control, 14 health, mobile shooting, adding -1 to hit everything, casting 2 spells, +1 of banishment. You're like, holy crap, this model's amazing. How is he so cheap? And it's because people are not incorporating the cost of, these units you're bringing back, to the table. And that's where some of the power from him comes from.
Is the Lord of Change going to get me to build into a bunch of demons? Like, should I be getting in that reinforced unit of pinks? Because that's what, 140 right now. Reinforced is 280.
Yep.
We already talked about like the value of Zangor reinforced, right? Zangor on disc is Enlighten's 170, Skyfire's a 170. So reinforced, you're looking at 350 kind of thing. I like, and this is the challenge, right? Is because you can't have everything, or when you start adding Kairos, Lord of Change, Zangor reinforced, Pink Horrors reinforced, you're probably pretty close to 2,000 points at this. My basic maths.
Correct, right? And so this might be a situation where you take maybe, I built lists before where it's like the Lord of Change and the Change Caster who offers +3 rally if in a certain range if we're on demon units. And now I'm going to take 4 to 5 units of pinks, right? I'm going to take 1 or 2 units of blues, and I'm going to flood the table with nothing but pinks and blues. And I'm going to take my Lord of Change and a guy, and I'm literally going to let you just kill me. And I'm going to keep blowing up. When we talk about pinks in a minute, you'll see they do a lot of damage to your opponent, right, over time. And then all of a sudden I'm bringing another unit of pinks back, another unit of blues back. I'm retreating the pinks out, putting the blues in to add more pinks. There's so many things you can do with the Lord of Change with recursion. So I do value him quite a bit depending on the list. If you're taking at least, I would say, 2 reinforced whore blocks or a reinforced flamer block of 2 of something, then the value of him is exponentially. But if you don't take any demons or anything reinforced, maybe not so much, but he's still very effective on his own. He's still a level 2 caster. He's still bringing on 2 manifestations. He's still teleporting things. If Karos happens to roll Snake Eyes, which is going to happen, you have another caster there to cast spells at a decent amount. And so I do value him quite a bit. He's in my list. I like him a lot in my list, but he's not an auto include. I would say Karos is more of an auto include in most lists.
And 2 birds is definitely not auto include. It can work, but it's not necessarily every list starts with 2 big birds.
No, not every list starts with 2 big birds. Again, this just goes back to what's your play style, right? And this is just mine. It's very good, but it's not an auto include.
Yeah. And I mean, like the Zangor build, you probably don't need 2 big birds. Probably maybe one's probably enough, or none. Actually, you could even run a list with none.
Yeah, absolutely. It's you maybe don't need at that point if you're going Zangors, maybe you go with the +1 to unbind and Karos, like you mentioned, and you have the Curseling who can now cast spells in your opponent's turn, right? And so there's a lot going on with it, but he's definitely not included, but he's very good.
What are some of our other favorite picks? I don't know. Given the time, maybe I don't know 3 or 4, depending on how fast we do it. No speed. I'm not trying to push you forward, but and I mean those 2 are really chunky war scrolls anyway. Yeah. But do you want to go picks?
I mean, so yeah, I mean you can scroll through it. I don't value. You go one by one. I'll tell you right away, really quickly.
All right. Go ahead. Here's a hot take. Fate Skimmer.
Skip. Just skip.
Why?
He's 8 health, 5 up save, 6 up ward save. He's going to die in a heartbeat. He's only effective in close range. Keep it moving. He's going to die. It's too many points. Yeah. Change caster depends on your list. The fact that you can rally 3 if you're leaning heavy into, hordes of units, he's valuable, especially if you include him in your general's regiment. Because you don't want to have too many drops. I do value the change caster specific builds with lots and lots of horse. So he's good.
I like the Lured Flames ability as well, adding +1 to hit rolls against units that are burning. Plays really nicely in some of the rules that we've already really liked a lot. Our good old Chaos Spawn of Tzeentch.
Yeah, you can see him. Control of 1, 2d6. He hits on 5s, not even 4s. Okay, 2d6 hits, average 7. You're going to have 5s, 4s, no ran, 1 damage, crit to companion, beast, Tzeentch. No, he's going to stop a unit with the spell. He's good if you have free 60 points because of that spell. But without that spell, I wouldn't do him unless you take that spell.
Quick question about the Chaos Spawn. So a lot of lists are looking for some throwaway units that can seize the center or take the flanks. Could I take 2 Chaos Spawns? Not could I, because I know I can. Is it worth it, or is this a bad idea if I take 2 Chaos Spawns, I don't know, run them up the board to seize the center, and it's low risk, they die, who cares? Or take the flanks, they take the flanks, and they don't really play into the game for the rest. Or maybe they double up with the Kairos second pick of the battle tactic. Or is that a bad idea?
I mean, nothing is a bad idea. It just, again, it's your play style. But I would look at things to where if I'm going to seize a center and I know I'm going to lose the unit because I can't teleport him out, I want things that can recursion. So I want more demon focused, things that I can bring back at least half strength. Something like a unit of 3 flamers, where if I bring it up there and I die, I'm only losing 1 flamer because I can recursion 2 of them back, right? And that gives me a free tactic. Skyfire, excuse me, not Skyfire, Screamer, same thing. A unit of 3, where 2 units of 3 take the flanks, or seize a center. I'm only losing 1 model out of each one of those units if I decided to bring, if that's the play style I'm going with. Something that's not going to be a throwaway. I don't like throwaway because that's how you lose games. If you just throw away units, right? Every unit has to have a purpose and a reason to take them. And demon units with the Lord of Change becomes effective if you take them in, singular units of 3 with the ideology of I'm going to sacrifice this and bring it back.
So if my goal was to run 2 Beasts of Chaos, Beasts of Chaos Spawns, Beasts of Chaos, thoughts and prayers, guys. If I was running around 2 Chaos Spawns and their whole objective was to, I don't know, body block with Varangard, seize the center, cheap throwaway units, take the flanks and maybe move into take their lands, be general objective scorers before that obviously people take it away because they're beasts. You're saying that the value, you'd rather find the 80 extra points for 2 units of Screamers rather than 2 units of Chaos Spawns in this hypothetical scenario.
And a lot of reasons why is Chaos Spawns will come back, right? They'll die and they can come back. The problem is their move is not guaranteed. I like guaranteed, right? And because you have feel bad moves where you need this spawn to get up there and you roll 1-1-4 and you're like, well, I didn't make it, right? And now I have to actually take something I care about and I have to put it in danger zone. And it's just not knowing what you can do with it. But it is nice that they come back to life. It's just nothing's guaranteed with a spawn. But you can run them. You can roll that 3d6 dice. And the average is what, 10, 9, 10, 11, right? It's going to happen. You're going to get them up there most likely. But I played so many games where I felt bad with some of my dice rolls.
I've rolled 3d6 and got a 4.
Yep.
I've been in those worlds. So I just wanted to call it out because 60 points is really cheap, like incredibly cheap.
Yeah.
So yeah,
And they can come back too. It's great, right? The changeling has its purpose, right? You can remove from the battlefield, set up again, more than 3 inches away. I've seen a lot of people use mechanics like this. This is where some of your destiny dice go when you want to teleport him back out. He can be effective. I don't value him as to take a spot of because I like to keep my drops at 2. 1 if possible, but really 2 because I want to feel I guess we haven't really talked about this. I don't like my general's regiment to have a lot of units. I like it to only have 1 or 2 because I don't want to give something for free to my opponent. I want to fill my secondary one. And so units are very valuable to me. And so he's with his 6 wounds and a 5-up save. He has a really cool gimmick and it's nice and it can be effective and you can get him out of harm's way. And he's still a level 2 caster, which is still very strong. He's good. I just can't, pick him over something like a Lord of Change or Kairos unless I'm really trying to min-max, right? But he's okay. He's just a little bit of a gimmick. He's fun, Level 2 is pretty great.
And the changeling can go into a deceiver unit, so like the Lord of Change, for example. So you don't have to go high drops by taking a changeling. But yes, again, was he 160 points?
He's a good amount. He's a chunky. But he's still level 2 caster though, so you have to keep in mind. But he just doesn't have bonuses to cast.
The puckish misdirection. Like if you think about like what's happening with cavalry right now, if you really lean into that, there are some good tricks with that. If you start playing around with Arch Deceiver and puckish misdirection, but you're banking on that 3-up. If you fail that 3-up, then What a waste.
And I've failed quite a bit. And that's something about 4th edition. I really don't like how they have done, like, if you roll a a 3, I wish everything was just like
a 2 up on a D3.
Yeah, I hate the D3 and the D6.
Just call it a 3 up. Just call it a 3 up on a D6.
That's it.
It's
I agree. I love Pink Horse. These guys are awesome, right? I like what they did with them. It's 6-inch move, 6 up save, control 1, 2 health. Holy crap, that's awesome. 2 health. 12-inch range, 2 attacks, force, my something 1, but it adds ward flame with the shooting attack. They're good, right? Little short range, but again, they're there just to protect your good stuff. They're there just to bubble wrap, sit on objectives, funnel people in, and their passive ability is great, right? Each time a model in this unit is slain, before removing the model from play, pick one of the following effects, right? And the split, which is great, pick a friendly blue horse unit or brimstone unit, unit within 12, and it's not wholly within, it's just within 12 inches. So it's really far range. And you can return 2 blue whore units. Or the Petty Vengeance, pick an enemy unit in combat with this unit and to be the target and roll a dice on a 4+. And the fact that it's just pick a unit in combat, you can have a unit that's 10 inches over, 10 inches over here, and the unit's stretched out kind of far, and all of a sudden you're killing this stuff and it's moving towards your, and doing damage. It's really, really, really good. And I have in my list a unit of 20 of these guys. And they're demons, so if they're near the Lord of Change, they're -1 to hit. It's they add flaming, they add burning. I use this unit a lot, and what I'll speak about is I'll charge this unit in. I'll charge a blue whore unit into my opponent, knowing that they're going to kill 20 of them, or I'll allow my opponent to hit me, knowing they're going to kill 30 of them, right? Or do 30 wounds, and I'll have 6 blue and brim horror units left, and then I'll retreat my blue horror unit out, taking D3 damage, bring me down to only 4 models or 4 brims, and then I'll charge in my pinks, knowing that you have to attack my pinks, and then I'll refill my blues back up, and I'll rinse and I'll repeat again and again and again as I rally. And then when you finally kill the units, my Lord of Change will bring them back. And the whole time I'm doing Petty Vengeance, the whole time I'm bringing 2 blues back, and it's very powerful when you intermix the 2 units and your opponent cannot outright kill your whole unit in one swing, right? So they're great.
I think they are at risk of a points increase.
Oh no, they're at a big risk of a points increase.
Between us, I mean, like everyone who's watching this video, but I look at 140 points, 2 wounds per model, 10 models in a unit. They split into more models, or they do damage. Like they do this is always the challenge with pink horrors, is that they're either too expensive and you can't take them, or they're too cheap that you just spam them. And right now we are back to the spammable approach, where I could happily run my 80 pink horrors, my 60 blue horrors, and my 80 flamers in my list. Not that I don't know if that's actually a 2,000 point list, that's just what I own, but they are very, very good priced.
Oh, absolutely. The value on these guys is through the roof.
Yeah, really a reinforced unit is just a lot of wound density, and they'll tar pit and protect that Lord of Change Kairos, hold that point of the board. Like, they're just very good.
Absolutely. And here's the second one, baby. These are the blue whores and the brimstone whores in one unit, right? It's amazing, right? And same stat line, right? Except the melee profile is better, which is even more amazing. And nothing's like having 20 blue whores or brimstone whores attack it, and you're telling your opponent, oh, that's 12 saves. Like, 12 saves? Holy, these are blue whores. But it's really, 40 attacks, right? And if you all that attack, it could be very good. Shooting's good. Adds ward flame. Very small, model size at 25 mil. And each time a blue horde model in this unit is slain, before you remove that model from play, you roll a dice on a 3+. You can add 1 brimstone horde model to this unit, right? And the designer notes is you cannot have more than 10 blue horde models and 10 brimstone horde models in the unit. Which I've seen some conversation online in some tournament. The way they ruled it in the game, I think should be FAQ'd, but where you'll lose, I guess 20 blues will become 20 brims, right? And now I have
assuming you get the 3 up.
And assuming I rolled all 3 ups, just hypothetically, I rolled all 3 ups off 20 brims perfectly. And then all of a sudden I'll retreat them out, I'll lose 3, and I'll go down to 17. And then my pinks go in. And when pinks die, it allows me to add blue horror units specifically to the unit. And I'll add 20 blues and I'll still have 17 brims. And now my unit became 37. And that's because the designer notes say you can never have more than 10 blue horror models and 10 brimstone. And when you reinforce it, it doubles to 20 and 20. So you can never have more than 20 blue and 20 brim in one unit. And so it's a little bit of a interesting thing they're allowing, and that tournament, but that unit becomes very, very powerful if you're able to perfectly have 20 and 20 and you just gained a whole hell of a lot of models, right? But that is definitely something that I think they should touch on a little bit.
Can you rally them?
Yeah, you can rally. And
Right,
what do you
so
rally? You can
so
pick and choose what models die. There's no restrictions. I haven't seen a single restriction that says, if his models die, I can first take the brims first, and then I'll pick the blues, and then I'll roll a 3 up on the blues to become brims, and then when I bring models back, they count as 1 wound each technically because it's health 1. And I'll roll my 6 dice because they don't have a musician for 7, and I'll just see how many 4s I can have. Bring blues back. It's a very strong unit, and they're very cheap. And just like you said, there's going to be a points increase. I just hope it's not detrimental, but we'll see.
Like they're clearly better than you're paying for them, but I don't want to see them nerfing the ground. Like I want to see a world where we can run pinks and blues and be okay with it without abusing them. And we're back to abusing level. Let's find the middle. One day we're in like year 8 of Age of Sigmar. We will eventually get horrors correct.
Yeah.
One day, maybe the battle tome.
And then acolytes will be broken. I'm like, yes.
Oh God. Don't make me build my acolytes. All right. How many units? We got a lot. We got a lot of units to go, my friend. Let's punch this out. Let's punch this out.
I mean, you could skip some of these. These are okay. I mean, they have a purpose for battle tactics, but that's it. Like honestly, screamers purpose for battle. You're not reinforcing a screamer unit to 6 and trying to do damage, even with their mortal wounds on a 4+. It just they don't do enough. Control value 1. This guy,
Flamers, though.
Exalted Flamer can add a little bit of fun, to a Flamer block. He's decent because his range is 16 and not 12 like regular Flamers, so his range is bigger. He will do damage. The concern I have is if you have to face a shooting army, he only has 4 health, and you're not bringing this model back because it's not a unit of 2. He moves 9, 5 up save, control 4. Health 4, control 1. Range of weapons pretty decent. You're hitting pretty good with all out if you decide to. Your wounding 4s, your anti-infantry. He's decent for his profile. His points are a little high for me to take him over just another unit of 3 flamers. But his passive is add 1 to wound rolls for units that are shooting burning. So when you add burning, now you're +1 to wound them, which makes it more reliable. And once per turn in your shooting phase, you can give a flamer unit a bonus. Again, you have to roll it. I don't find myself rolling lots of 3+, but you can, and they do crit 2 hits, which can become very powerful if it works, right? And he's good. He's not great. He's good. If kind of one of those units that I'm just like not crazy about, but he's not bad.
It's a good support piece, but if I'm choosing Flamers versus Exalted, I'm going Flamers every day. But if I'm going to run a Flamer unit or a reinforced unit, Flamer unit, I'm probably taking that as well to double down on the investment.
Absolutely. These are really great because the Lord of Change brings half of them back, right? And so a unit 3 becomes 2, a unit 6 becomes 3. They move decent 9 inches and they shoot 12, so they have an effective 21-inch threat range. It's one of the reasons I don't like them so much, because some people are just perfectly 22 inches away on the higher end of the game, and these units are no longer effective, right? But move 9 inches, 5 up save, health 2, 1 control. Shooting range is short at 12 inches. They have 3 attacks, which is great. You're talking, quite a bit of attacks when you incorporate the champion with 10 attacks. Hitting on 3s, which is great because you can all out hit. Wounding on 4s, but if you're shooting a burning unit, you're +1 to wound, so normally wound on 3s if you choose to. If you're shooting infantry, you're -1 rend, but again, with Karos, you can make something else -1 rend. If Purple Sun happens to be in combat from the turn before, another -1 rend could become very great, and also applies Ward Flame. Combat, they suck, but in shooting, they're great. And they're a great unit to teleport and to be effective, as long as your opponent cannot redeploy on a 4+.
Good little unit, especially like with Nighthaunt too. Although like not hex raids, obviously, but with a lot of the infantry running around, not a bad little unit to put out volume of damage.
Absolutely, not bad at all. I see a lot of people value Gaunt Summoner. He's very good in combat heavy, Zangor builds where you can, with his in your movement phase Book of Profane Secrets, where you can literally teleport them, up closer and to be more effective, especially with your Destiny dice. He's a level 2 caster. He's very good. His spell of teleporting is very good. Everything else is just kind of okay. I do like it, but he can also be a hindrance if you accidentally leave him open and you have a unit in the, the secret place, and you can lose them.
That almost happened to one of my opponents. So I had a game where they put 10. There was a Slaves to Darkness army where they put 10 chosen in the Silver Tower. I had Indrasa who had 3d6 charge, and I'm like, I can get to this Gaunt Summoner. I'm lower drops than you. I can kill this Gaunt Summoner in a combat, and those chosen will hit the table. Yeah. Maybe don't do that. So yes, don't always put them into the Silver Tower, especially if they got high shooting or high range, because you will lose that unit very easily.
Yeah, it's a hit or miss unit for me. Depends on your tactics and your play style, but he's not bad.
He's not bad. But again, you've also got a lot of teleporting now with the faction spell. So do you even need the Gaunt Summoner outside of that? Probably not, but maybe you do. I don't know.
I don't think so, but
I don't think so either, but someone will have a use case for them.
Yeah. Magister on disc, it's good. It's, again, a lot of these support characters, they're okay. When the new points come out, if they drop these and increase everything else, then the value might change in the future. But right now, 14-inch move is huge. 4-up save is pretty good for Tzeentch. Control 2, 6 health, it's decent. 18-inch range shooting, but it's only one shot. But it does apply, the Ward Flame, that's pretty decent. In your hero phase, you can take the chance, you can add 1 to the unit's power level. If 2 or more dice of the casting roll, it's one of those things where it's like you could possibly kill yourself. I don't like it, right? And there's no bonus, like it used to be in 3rd edition where you become a spawn, or I can guarantee kill myself. And I had the Incarnate back then, and I can make my Incarnate go wild and stuff like that. There's no advantage. It just seems like a disadvantage to even use that ability. But I guess, there's a chance. And then the one passive ability is while they are within this unit's combat range, friendly disc of Tzeentch units can, use the charge abilities even if they run, which would be good with the combat,
Zangor on disc.
Zangors, yep. Exactly. Being able to keep up and move and run and charge with Destiny dice and, guarantee charge, they're pretty good, right? So if you're going more combat heavy list, maybe you include him because you want your units to be able to run and charge, and things of that nature.
That was the one use case I had, is if I was building into an offensive Zangor on disc build, absolutely. Curseling, you are blessed with small support heroes, and I think a trend that we're seeing across the board, across a lot of armies, is that a lot of these support heroes, because of the regiment system, you're just not seeing them as often, and it's not worth going higher drop. Yes, you've got some flexibility around Deceivers and the Kabbalist, but that's also a slot that you could either be putting in that reinforced unit of blah. So I find it really, and to your point as well, the General's Regiment, people are trying to avoid putting certain or many units in because you don't want to give away the free tactic.
Yeah, no, I agree. And it comes down to, if they decide to decrease the points cost of units that are not being utilized, then we're going to see a lot of points drops in these support characters. And that might be a situation where you want to take 5 support characters and no big birds because you just want to cast the D3 Mortal Wounds 5 times, and the casting value is only a 6, and they're still going to be able to cast so many manifestations because you're going to outcast in regards to having the potential of casting so many spells over your opponent. When you talk about some of these support characters who have wizard level 2, it can become very useful. Or if you focus on the Kabbalist faction, where this guy's now +1 to unbind, and each time this unit unbinds a spell, you roll a dice. On a 4+, you subtract 1 to that character's power level, and if it's a level 2 character, now they can't cast any more spells, and he became immensely more useful because maybe that second spell was a manifestation that you're going to have to deal with in your turn. And so this one specific character I can see being played in Tzeentch, depending on your family, especially if you take the Kabbalist family, he could be useful.
Yeah. No, there's definitely some legs on this one. I don't hate it. I just hate the 4-up.
I agree. I like the shooting attack because it's your attack. You're putting ward flame on stuff. D6 shots. You could possibly do 1 damage. Magister is very similar to the disc. He's okay. He's again a small character, 5 health, 4 up save, control 2. He takes up points. He takes up a slot. He's only a 1 wizard, but he can become a 2 wizard if you want to possibly kill him, and he's a little bit easier to kill because he has 5 health versus 6 on the guy on the disc. But you can also keep him a little safer because he is an infantry character. Can't see him or can't target him if he's next to a unit. And then what's the other one? I haven't even really looked at this. Pick an enemy unit within 12 inches of this unit to target.
The Web of Intrigue. Yeah, I was just rereading that, thinking how would I use that, and I don't know if I have a good answer just yet, given that friendly unit can move 3 inches, but it cannot move into combat during any part of that move. Like, why do I want that?
And this is the problem with what I'm looking at. They've definitely toned down a lot of the abilities on some of these support characters to the point where it's like, okay, why would I take this model over 3 flamers, right? Or over almost getting a unit of Skyfires, right? Where's the value coming from with these characters? What are they adding to the list? It doesn't help my family. It doesn't help, getting more artifacts. It makes my regiments higher. It makes sure my opponent has the ability of picking. And the only thing I can think of is if the points were so cheap to where it's like, okay, you know what? I'm going to lean into casting D3 damage.
But we don't want that. We don't want that. And small, what we used to call sub-commanders, I feel like they're the ones who have copped the negative brunt in 4th edition. They're just across the board. Not a lot of people are building into minor heroes. And that's why superheroes, whether it's the mega gods of Marathi, Nagash, Archaon, and Alariel, or it's these 300, 400 support pieces, these 100-point idiots, you're seeing a lot less on the table. Where in the past you'd see, 4 to 5 to sometimes even 6 heroes. You're not seeing that even remotely. It's probably 3 to 4 at best on average. Some people are just going 2 heroes, 2 big heroes, and that's it.
Yeah. That's what I did. I've always liked my Ogroid, right? And I still do. He doesn't have the greatest save. He only has 5 up save, but he does have 8 health. He's a little bit more hardy. And he has his little range attack, right? Which is not bad. It does D3 damage. It's not great. But his melee profile is pretty decent, right? Because you can all out attack and get him hitting on 3s, wounding on 2s, be -1 Ren and doing damage 3 on the charge. That's decent for Tzeentch, all right? Maybe not other armies, but for a foot character, it's not bad. And having the passive of adding +1 to hit and wound, if this unit suffered any damage, then kind of picking when he's going to swing versus your opponent, trying to make it to where your opponent can do a little bit of damage to him, it's good. And you're also, at the end of the turn, it looks like you're adding burning, right? And that's really, it's great, right? And so it's offering a little bit of everything. The only thing I don't like is he's kind of easy-ish to kill with only having a 6-up ward and a 5-up save. So you got to kind of have to be careful what you put him into. But he's not horrible, I don't think.
No, not horrible. And it's funny because we talked about the weird flame blade, and one of the first units I thought about was like this. The Ogoroid Thermitage would be a great recipient of the weird flame blade if I took that artifact, but it's already there. So actually, it just reinforces why I take the 9-eyed tome and not sacrifice my artifact. And if I really wanted that ability, I just take the unit. Don't spend the artifact.
Yeah. Or the illusionist, right? You want something -1 to hit, right? And it's just, he could be good by himself, but, not great.
Zangor Shaman is what you expect, right? Like it's if you're building into your Zangor, you take it. Like mobile wizard, nice
Yeah,
little ability.
yeah. It fits a certain profile of building a list. He's okay. He's not something I put a lot of stock in because it's not my play style. But somebody will put stock into him specifically. I just don't like the fact that a lot of things require a roll, right? And whenever you're rolling, you're taking chances. I much prefer passive, abilities.
Yeah, like if I look at this, like other than being a mobile wizard, if I'm running an acolyte or a demon build, doesn't really offer a lot outside of the mobile spell. So again, you're building Zangor, good choice. I
Yeah.
guess, do you want the Magister on disc or the Zangor Shaman, depending on what ability and what you're building around?
There we go, baby. The best unit, the best unit for Tzeentch. Skyfires. They move fast. They have a good save of 4+ for Tzeentch. Control 1, it is what you expect, but 4 health, right? They're hard. And you're talking about 24 wounds for a reinforced unit. Good range at 18 inches, and they move 14. So you're talking 32 inches of threat. 2 attacks, always hitting on 4s, always wounding on 3s. You're always -1 rend, and you're doing D3 damage. A solid profile. In combat, you're not bad either. You're talking about your disc attacks right there. 2 attacks, 4s, 3s, -1 D3. Not bad, right? And most importantly, his passive ability. You ignore negative modifiers to hit and wound. Excellent. But you can still be affected by positives. And more of a nothing burger, which is the +1 to hit, for attacks made by friendly warp flock. I mean, it's good if you kind of lean into that. I personally don't. I guess it's not a nothing burger for if you're leaning into it, because +1 to hit is good with not having to use command points, especially if you're really going into it. But I love my Skyfires. They're very strong. They move fast. You can keep them safe. You can be defensive. They're effective in your turn, my turn. They're great.
There's a reason why Skyfires and your Enlighten have always been really popular. Now with Cover Fire, it just elevates Skyfires yet again.
Absolutely.
Anything to say about the Zangors on foot, whether it's Zangor or Zangor Enlighten on foot?
I mean, a lot of people like. I mean, the smaller units, not so much. They're just too small. 3 health, 9 wounds in a unit. But the regular Zangors, yeah. I mean, a reinforced block of 20. I mean, that's a lot of wounds. That's 40 wounds. 5+ save is not great, but you're talking 40 wounds, right? And that's huge. They have a decent amount of attacks, right? It's pretty great. And you look at the a few of them will have the Savage Great Blade with 2 attacks, 4s, 3s, -1, 2 damage. And if you're in your opponent's territory with a teleport and a guaranteed charge, they can be effective with crit 2 hits with all those swings, being able to put forth quite a bit of damage to your opponent. Now, you're not going to hit, Chaos Nurgle, you reinforce unit of 10 Chaos Nurgle Knights. I wouldn't do that, right? They're going to, bump up their armor save to a 2+, and you're going to be swinging pretty hard. But against the right unit in the right circumstance, these guys will be very powerful depending on what you hit. You just have to know what you're hitting.
These will come back into fashion when pink horrors go up. Like
Yep.
when you look at pink horrors and Zangor now, similar wound density, similar points. Right now, the argument is the pink horrors, but the minute pink horrors start creeping up again, this becomes way more attractive for your points.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
right now, like, am I taking pink horrors or Zangor for the same price? Actually, Zangors are a little bit more expensive, aren't they? They're 150 to 140.
Yeah, they're more expensive. I prefer the horse because you can bring them back. These guys you can't bring back. Once you kill them, they're gone.
Yeah, and they split and they do damage, and like it's a hard argument.
Yep.
Obviously, yeah, it's a hard argument.
Yep.
We got Zangor on disc. Let's just fast track to these last
Yeah.
two. How we got left? Oh, we only got two left anyway. Perfect.
Yeah.
Acolytes.
Skip. Just skip. I don't even want to talk about it. I'm so upset. I have beautifully painted and converted acolytes. I am just frustrated. I almost want to burn them like that YouTube video. I'm so upset, but no, they're crap. I don't want
Why are you Lord Tremendous-ing your
holy
acolytes?
holy crap, they're bad. I mean, you get a unit of 10, all right. 10 models have 10 wounds with a 5+ save and no ward save. So very easy to kill, and they cost more than 100 points. They have a 18-inch range, which is decent. right? And their shooting attack is okay, and they do, it's just okay. It does apply ward flame, so in that sense. But if they drop the points enough, maybe I might use them as a screen. But it's right now in the current state, it's a pass. While this unit includes any models that accompanied by subtract 1 from casting rolls within. If you're within 12 inches of an enemy wizard, you're gonna die. You have a 5-up save, no after save with 1 wound. Yeah, coach, no, just.
They also reaped the benefits in the past of battle line requirements, right? Where we had to take 3 battle line. Now that that's not there, it's like, what's their role? And if you want cheap screens or things like that, you've got certain other units that can tap into it. You can build super elite and just go nothing but whatever. What's their role?
Right now, they're not screening really well. They don't have like in the past, they used to have a better shooting attack. Excuse me, they used to have a better shooting attack because they had a spell. And the spell that they casted gave you, points to summon, right? So they were effective in that way. They gave you points. They were a screen. They also made it to where you were -1 rend, and it was pretty reliable because nobody wanted to dispel that stupid spell. They were so afraid of your other ones. They also had a 6-up after save, so they were a little bit more defensive. They were also better in combat. They had a few models that were doing 2 damage per swing, right? And it was a lot more. It looks like they still do, right? 3 out of 10 models can have the curse blade. They still have that, right? So a few of them can be a little bit swingier like they were, but they lost also their bird, where every time an enemy unit casted a spell on a 4+, you did a mortal wound to them. And that would stop, a few casters who are like, okay, I only have 6 wounds and I'm going to cast 3 spells and take 1 or 2 mortal wounds. It might make them think twice, especially since you were also getting summoning points for it too. But right now they don't even have a banner, right? So you're not rallying them +1. Like they just now, like what, like I can't speak to them.
And I think the other thing as well is that they're the same price point as the Jade Obelisks. So if I wanted a 110-point unit for 10 models, the Jade Obelisks, just comparatively, is just better value. It adds more to my army just there, let alone because obviously you can't reinforce the Jade Obelisks, but I don't want to reinforce the Carrick Acolytes. If I'm going to reinforce something like that, I'm reinforcing Pig Horrors or I'm reinforcing your Zangors on foot. So the role, I'm better off with Jade or I'm better off doing something else with those 110 points. I just don't need that role filled. This, however, has some interesting rules, I think.
I mean, yeah, they're interesting. If you're playing against faction terrain, they're very good. Against faction terrain. The concern is just the 1 health with a 4-up save. I know the 4-up save can't be modified, which is great. Positive or negative. Now, if it was just negative, they might be even better because then you're like, all right, all of defense, I'll have a 3-up. Like this unit might be good, but it's positive and negative. Teleporting next to a faction terrain might be very useful for them, right? Where you're facing somebody's troll army and all their trolls are moving up, and you're like, you know what? I'm going to teleport these bad boys right behind you. There's no rule that stops me from teleporting on your terrain, and now I'm going to blow up your terrain on your turn 1, and now every model I kill is dead, right? So they definitely have a purpose in terms of that. Their shooting attack is okay. There's no rend to it. Beyond that, I mean, it's definitely better than Acolytes, but when you compare these guys to a unit of 10 Blue Horse, which is only 10 points more, and they're demons and they're smaller footprint and they're more reliable and they're harder to kill and they have a 6-up after save and these guys don't, like, it's just not comparable. Now, when you increase the points of Horse and maybe drop these a little bit, then it becomes more of a like, let's rethink this and maybe add these in as a purpose for a few small things.
I said interesting, not good.
Yeah,
they are like they're okay. They're fine. Like they're not terrible. They're not amazing. They're fine. They bring something unique. And if you just don't want to spam the same type of units, or you want something to add another dimension to your army, I think they're worth considering. But certainly you've got to be very smart with those points because you've got so many things that could fill your slot. So this is the list that Kaleb had went 8-0 at Nova and went through some incredible opponents. So it was six or 5 games, then cutoff. I assume was that how it worked?
It was 5 games and then the cutoff, and you played the 6th game on day 2, and then
In a
you paid
bracket.
and that was the first bracket, the top 8 bracket, and then you played the last 2 games on the last day, 7 and 8. Which, by the way, I mean, I think I've told you that night on my going into game 7 and 8 against Gavin, I got sick so bad where it's first time in my life I actually stayed up the entire night and I didn't sleep. Just, I don't want to get gross or anything, but my stomach was destroyed. I had food poisoning, and I almost quit. I almost, like, literally just, I told Gavin, I said, "Hey man, I don't know if I can play this game," and like, it was bad, and it was rough. But yeah, this the list. The spell lore was the lore of change, with the teleporting mechanic. Yeah.
I meant to ask you that before we started.
It's okay.
I used my Crew Boys template and I forgot because the list that you sent me, no, when I was looking at the Nova list on BCB, it didn't have the spell lore.
Gotcha.
So I actually meant to ask you before we went live. So what was it? The lore of change, right?
Yeah, lore of change. Yeah.
It was already there. See, it's magic.
There you go. Magic.
It's not the past, it's not the future, it's the present. So just really quickly for anyone who's listening to me, so it's the Weird Flame host, Law of Change, Morbid Conjuration as the manifestation law, 2 drops. One is Kairos with a reinforced unit of Zangor Skyfires. You then have a second regiment, which is Lord of Change with the Rod of Sorcery. The trait is Illusionist. The artifact is the Nine-Eyed Tome. You've got a reinforced unit of Blue Horrors, a reinforced unit of Pink Horrors, reinforced unit of Skyfires. That was 2,000 points on the nose.
Yeah. So we spoke about this a couple times. So I want my drops to be, about 2, because I want to keep my general's regiment very thin and my other regiment very thick because I want as many units as possible. That was the first ideology because I want to make it to where 9 times out of 10 I want my opponent to go first. Because I want to be effective in every turn. And normally when your opponent goes first, they have to bring something up to set on an objective to get points or to achieve a battle tactic like seize the center. All my opponents, they know I could teleport, so they were concerned about doing the edges because they knew I could take a unit of 20 blues and just put them right there in front of you, and it'd be very difficult to achieve that. But overall, the list was made to be able to allow my opponent to go first. It was to keep my regiments very thin on the generals and kind of thick on the other one. The manifestation is the most broken one out right now, which is just the most value for every one of those endless spells are effective, and we all know what they are. Double battle tactics with Kairos we spoke about. The reason I took 2 Skyfire units versus more than 2 is because I wanted to get the most bang for my buck, and I wanted to use my command points and abilities as useful as possible. By having the Skyfires and Generals Regiment and giving priority target, they're always going to be +1 to hit and +1 to wound. And by having a second unit, I can always all-out attack with them. So they're always going to be hitting on 3s on both units. One's going to hit on 2s against your enemy's General Regiment, while the other one wounds on 3s. And you're just maximizing the efficiency because both units are hitting on 3s. And you're able to move them in positions because they both move 14 inches, but keep your stuff protected. But the way I played almost every game is I had my blues and pinks creating a bubble wrap around my army, and I would funnel units into both of those units by at the same time keeping my Lord of Change wholly within 12 inches of both of those units to make sure they're always -1 to hit. And I would then from there always cast, no commands with the Kairos or -1 to hit and wound on a different unit. Like, let's say if I was playing against a troll heavy army, I'd be like, you're -1 hit and wound. You're going to be also -1 to hit again. So you'll be -2 to hit and -1 to wound. You're going to be also -1 to hit. And I'm going to do my Warp Flame ability on you. So you'll be -1 to wound also. Making it to where you're really maximizing what can do what against your army. And trying to use terrain in such a way with these big blocks of blues and pinks to where I'm putting myself in the middle of each one, creating big, areas where my Lord of Change and Kairos are staying protected while they constantly cast spells to burn you, constantly summon more endless spells, while the Skyfires are going around and staying protected still by staying behind stuff if I need to, or putting myself in a position to where you have to go back to back to touch them. and you have to fail one of your battle tactics, because if you go back to back, you're not going to get it. And so making sure I keep that nice 18-inch distance as much as possible, only if I can cast the no commands on you. If I can't, then I'll make sure I'm within, 12 inches. So if you happen to do the redeploy 6, I'm still effective. And so making sure my ranges are always there, trying to make sure that you can never do a counter charge and be effective. It didn't work. None of this works perfectly. It's just trying to put the odds in your favor with each one of your movements. But yeah, I mean, it's kind of how it went. And most importantly, I want to let everyone know, like, a lot of tournament play, whenever you see somebody doing very well, a lot of times it's playing a tournament is a rock, paper, scissors game, because there's always going to be somebody who can beat you, right? I was really concerned about playing against Nighthaunt because they have a lot of, fast moving models, and I was able to dodge them, right? And I had a couple practice games against Nighthaunt. I did very well, but I didn't have to play anyone at the tournament that was playing Nighthaunt. So that was somebody who I was dodging. And part of success happens to be making sure you don't play any armies you're not good against. Another one was the Kangaroo list Tom was playing. And we had 90 shots with no ward save, and all my stuff has ward save. So I was very concerned about playing them as well. And I was able to dodge them as well. The armies I do very well against are combat heavy armies that don't hit really well, like trolls or fire slayers, where they have no real protection against my magic or shooting. Slaves of Darkness I do very well against as well, by being able to be so maneuverable, where I'm able to take all 2,000 points of my army and put it on one side of the table against maybe your 800 points. And it would take you a couple turns to get to me. And then by that time, I've teleported my stuff on the other side, cleaning up that side. I'm able to outmaneuver my opponent. And so snakes, things like that. Snakes are heavy combat snakes, being able to allow them to hit my front line and kill my screen, but they're not touching my good stuff. And snakes only have, 2 wounds each with, a low armor save. And I'm able to clean them up, even though they hit like a truck. Right. And so it's a lot of playing in heavy tournaments is match dependent, right? So don't get discouraged if you just fall into playing against somebody who has the rock to your scissor, right? And a lot of it is also just utilizing some of the things we talked about with the terrain and positioning, and making sure that if your opponent can swing twice, you don't keep yourself within 6 inches to that front line, because if they swing twice, they're still not touching your good stuff, right? And so knowing all the things your opponent can do, spacing, those kind of things, and match dependent is what led to my personal success. But yeah, that's
you can only play the cards that you're dealt, right? And I think I see this a lot where people are going to a tournament and they're like, how do I handle Nighthaunt? How do I handle Varangard? How do I handle Stormcast? How do I handle, and insert a faction here. But each of those factions has a different answer, and you can't respond to every challenge with every list. So a lot of it is, understanding the strengths of your army, playing to the advantages that you have, understanding what makes the meta the meta. And right now, a good assumption is high manifestations, high cavalry. Just 2 themes that you can work towards. But what you do and how you do it, it goes back to what I mentioned right at the start of this video, which is Kaleb is someone who's played Tzeentch since 2nd edition, maybe 1st edition. You know your army really well. You respond, and you know what your army can and can't do, and you make the most of it on the tabletop. So that's the lesson. And some people go, "Oh, hey, you won Nova without going to Nighthaunt." Well, it wasn't your fault. You played the cards that you were dealt with, right? But you played some incredible players, people who have won championships, were at the world champs, played in the world teams tournaments. Like you played some incredible players as well. So you didn't play the final against your brother though, which was probably a nice feature that.
Yeah. It was definitely nice not having to play my brother. I'll be honest. It seems like every tournament I go to, I end up playing against my brother, and it just sucks.
It's the best for me. I watch you two, and it's just so funny. You and your brother are just hilarious on the finals. I've got a couple of questions from Discord, and then we're going to bring this to an end. I know it's late on a school night for you. So a couple of rapid fire questions for you. Hungry asking, would you like to see the Mutalith Vortex Beast? Would you like to see the Mutalith Vortex Beast in a Disciples of Tzeentch roster? I actually don't hate that idea.
I mean, I think that Tzeentch needs more choice that's not all character heavy. I would love to see it. I want to see units that aren't random, but I understand that there is a place for random. But I don't hate it.
I don't hate it, obviously. And I do want to hear from you what you'd like to add in the battle tome at the very last question. A couple of other questions. J Rod saying, how would you like to see Tzeentch manifestations changed to make them a more competitive choice?
Well, I mean, I thought they were actually quite competitive in third edition. I thought that, if you just literally copy and paste third into fourth, they're competitive. Having the sigil do a radius bomb on a 4+ and possibly put a spawn, maybe if you had to pay for it, that's fine. That's just another way of getting spawns on the table and doing multiple damage on a 4+. The sigil was rolling 9 dice, and for every 4 up, it was doing a mortal wound. And it was picking the closest unit, and that was effective because that's just damage. The book was allowing you to re-roll casting, and there's not a lot of re-roll casting, and that would make it effective as well. Just bringing third into fourth would make it worth picking.
On the theme of manifestations, Derek asking, with morbid conjurations inevitably getting nerfed in the near future, how do you see the power level of Tzeentch being affected? And how would you pivot? I guess the second part's hard because we don't know if it's just manifestations in general or if it's morbid, but how do you see, I guess, Tzeentch's power level tied to something like morbid?
I mean, Tzeentch and Morbid are very strong together because you have 5 cast and they're all strong, and you have 4, endless spells. If they went completely just away and they weren't strong at all, I would probably pivot to Primal naturally. That's the second probably choice, with the possibility of the bridge one, depending on how I build my list. If I went maybe a little bit more Skyfire and heavy, or a little bit more shooting heavy, I might want the bridge to funnel in between 2 big pieces of endless spells, stopping my opponent from being able to get to me at all. Incarnate's very strong. Probably I would say Primal, or the bridge or the Incarnate would probably be where I would go.
Pancini, I think I got your name correct, mentioning, you'll never know. I just reading it off a script. It is now. If not, that's your name moving forward. During the deployment phase, what were your main concerns and preferences towards turn 1 battle tactics and going first or second? Was this consistent across matchups or matchup dependent?
Well, I mean, almost every matchup I played at Nova, I wanted to go second because I mostly played against heavy combat armies that couldn't destroy me in one turn and allowed me to set up the game. If I was playing against somebody who, like the Kangaroo list, I would have to play it a couple times, and again, this comes from practice. I want to see kind of what it can do against Tzeentch, and then rack again, so I understand how to beat it. But maybe taking first turn of that, where I maybe teleport a unit of 20 blues and I just strain them across my opponent's front line to where they can't move around me and get to my meat and potatoes, and they can only kill my blue horror units, and then I can resummon 10 back on my side, stopping them from being able to maybe get battle tactics or accomplish something. That would be my understanding going first or second, depending on who I'm playing against. What was the other part of that question?
It was more just around
deployment. So
and your battle tactics.
Yeah, so my thought process with battle tactics is I have to look at how my opponent deploys. And sometimes I'll purposely go on one side of the table, knowing my opponent also wants to go on one side of the table, to leave their terrain piece on the other side open. And so some of it is just kind of knowing what your opponent, has and can attack you with. And so if you're facing an all combat pigs, Iron Jaws, OBR, any type of combat, they're going to want to kind of go in front of you. So sometimes by you deploying first and just deploying your full army on one side of the table, they're going to do the same thing. And that makes it easier for me to take their lands over there, and then start funneling myself the other direction as well. If I'm playing against, I think Take the Lands is probably the easiest one that I go for because I like to keep my, Karos or Lord of Change far back to guarantee a spell. That's the one I normally go with because I know I can also teleport back in their turn to keep myself protected. I have positioned myself to do the flanks as well with my Skyfires to where both of them can still be effective but not take damage from my opponent. I normally never go seize the center because you're just putting yourself in harm's way. So I don't see myself doing that. And very occasionally, will I say kill a unit in your general's regiment. Maybe they have like a 5-wound spawn of chaos in their general's regiment, and they put it right in the open, and they can't, redeploy outside of protection range. And maybe I'll pick that one to kill it and just get a free battle tactic. So it mostly depends on the way my opponent deploys. Will be what I choose and how I play.
Last question from Discord, and then I'll ask you the final question, the final question. So Mortison Monty's saying, he's actually asked 2 good questions. I'm going to ask the first one. How come you chose Skyfires over Flamers? It's true that they can't be affected by negative to hit wound. However, Flamers of Tzeentch are cheaper. They can give out the burning keyword, which is great with the weird flame host, and their damage seems pretty similar. So why did you decide to run Skyfires instead?
Well, it's a good question. It's multiple reasons. First and foremost, Ward Flame can only be attached to 1 unit. So it doesn't matter if you have 20 units that apply Ward Flame, only one of them can be applied. And since I have other avenues of getting Ward Flame easy, I don't value that specific component of Flamers as much. Number 2, they don't move as fast. They're about 5 inches slower, which is quite a bit. They go from 9 inches on Flamers to 14 on Skyfires. And so the value of Skyfires being able to, possibly move up to 20 if I really need to do something and not shoot, or 14 and still be effective, will always bring way more value. I also like my units to be effective on every turn, and that comes down to the range, right? Skyfires are effective almost in every turn because they move so fast and they shoot so far. Flamers are not. Again, I find Skyfires hitting and wounding to be a lot more effective. It doesn't require burning mechanics to be applied, since burning mechanics can be turned off pretty easily by either rallying or healing or me just rolling a 1 or a 2. That's another reason, right? Also, Flamers suck at combat, right? They're not playing in that part of the game. And when you're talking about 240 points for Flamers or 340 for Skyfires, I want to play in every part of the game: movement, shooting, and combat. And I'm picking and choosing what I'm in combat with. I'm not going to charge a Bloodthirster unless it has like 3 wounds left, but I will charge Acolytes. I will charge Acolytes, and I will kill Acolytes very easily, right? So it's, or Jade Obelisk, right? I will charge those units, and I'll be effective by killing my opponent in certain ways. So I do like Flamers for the sense that they can come back with the Lord of Change, but it's not as valuable as Skyfire specifically right now.
I hear you. I do value units that can play in multiple phases of the game. Yep. So I can see that while it's a little cheaper, I can appreciate what you just shared. Last question, and then you can shout out your homies. When the battle tome drops, whenever that might be, what does Kaleb want to see? Is it a new thing? Is it a fundamental change? Like, what's your one wish from the new battle tome?
Oh gosh, I have so many wishes. Holy crap!
Right, I'll give you 3. You can rub me at the World Championships, and I'll give you 3.
Okay, I'll give you a big old rub.
Or just give me a bottom table bully shirt, and we'll call it.
There we go. Number one, I want them to stick with the lore, right? I want to stay true to the lore. We know the future, we know the past. We're all about magic supremacy. I want them to stay true to that. I want them to be kind of what they have been, from book 2, 3, and where we're at right now. I like that. I want to see list variety. I guess that's my number 2. I do not like the fact that everyone is playing Magic the Gathering. We spoke about this earlier. Every army in the game right now in 4th is playing Magic the Gathering. And what I mean by that is every army has a list, has the main number 1. This is the best list you can play right now. And so everyone's building those models, right? And everyone's right now building Skyfires, right? They're the best, for Tzeentch. And that's it. And I don't like that. I want more variety. I want to take Slaves of Darkness in my army. I want to take Beast of Chaos. I want to take Slaanesh. I want some allies. I still want Regiments of Renown. I want flavor. I want more. I kind of prefer it to be like the points limits of allies, where it's only 400 points of other flavor, but I want something beyond the core Tzeentch as well. The third thing is agendas. I loved hidden agendas. I loved what they had back in second edition, where if I complete certain things throughout the game, I got a bonus. Kind of like Slaves of Darkness has their own chart. It's similar to that. I like, basically taking a basic unit and giving it something extra. So list variety, my army becomes better throughout the game, and staying true to what Tzeentch is are the three.
I like it. I like it. Who knows? Knowing your luck, you'll get a terrain feature as well. Seems like. I mean, if Stormcast get a terrain feature, that blew me away. Like the minute Stormcast got a terrain feature, I'm like, all right, we're all getting terrain now.
I want a Christmas tree. That's what I want. I want a giant Christmas tree. Just put it right there in the middle. That's my Tzeentch terrain feature.
I could see like some wizardy kind of magic nexus, a portal or something. Maybe they'll bring out the what was the damn portal from first edition? The
Belwyn or the Realm Gates or the
Realm Gates, and the old Gaunt summoner could actually bring on a free unit from being next to the Gaunt, the Realm Gate, and like who knows?
It's cool. Free 10-man block, man. Like time has changed so much, but it's been fun.
A lot has changed, and what a wonderful way to wrap up a Tzeentch show. Any shout outs? Who do you want to say hello to? You're clearly going to say hello to your brother.
Bro, how's it going, man? First and foremost, your Discord chat with Tzeentch, right? The amount of passion that's in that group chat, all the guys and the girls who are in there just really expressing themselves, and that goes with all people, right? Everyone's just so much passion behind their armies. Just shout out everyone, man. Like they're killing it in that group chat. Everyone's rocking out. Thank you to my wife for letting me come down here and talk to you and put the kids to sleep. Wants to thank you if she watches. My mom, thank you for giving birth. 12-pound baby, love her. Today's Samantha's birthday. She's probably watching us. Happy birthday!
Happy birthday, Samantha.
But yeah, no, that's what we got.
All right, love your work, and I'll see you in almost 2 months, just a little over 2 months, and we'll be hanging out in Atlanta again.
Yep, got the Atlanta. Then I'm going to go to LVO and Adepticon.
Yeah, I'll miss you at LVO, but I'll see you at Adepticon.
There we go. It's going to be awesome.
It's going to be a lot of fun. But, and by the way, we mentioned at the top of the show, you have an Etsy store. Your Etsy store actually has some really good practical AoS resources. So what's the name of the Etsy store?
Well, it's Dorkdom Gaming. So literally DORKDOM space gaming. You can also just look up, AoS tracking stuff, and you'll literally find all my things there. I literally just started working on, I guess, my newest creation, which is like a TTS board where you would literally have magnets and move your parts around and place your battle tactics down. Just have everything from measuring sticks to tokens to custom stuff. And if you guys ever need anything, you can just contact me on Facebook, text message, email. I don't care. If you have questions about Tzeentch and you want to ask questions, reach out. I have a ton of people who have questions about army composition and what you think. And if you have anything, I'm always here, right? So wealth of knowledge, and I want to talk about it.
Always giving. I'll put the link in the episode as well. I do have a lot of your stuff, and I thoroughly enjoy it and find value. So I get nothing out of this, but legitimately, you make really good products. So I would highly endorse you go check them out and add them to your roster. Kaleb, thank you so much. Chat, I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you took away some things, some considerations, and hopefully helps you package up this craziness that is the Disciples of Tzeentch. I've lost my voice. I need to go have something for lunch. It's like 3:00. I've had no lunch. Like, it's time to go. It's time to go. I need to eat. You need to go to bed. All right. Hang on the line, but we'll chat to you later. Bye. Thanks for hanging around until the end. I hope you enjoyed that video and you walked away with a few new ideas. Now, if you did, I would love it if you pressed like on the video, as well as left me a comment with your thoughts. The conversation will continue over on Discord, and the link is down below in the episode description. I also want to give a massive shout out to the AoS Coach patrons and YouTube members who are supporting the channel and the growth that you're seeing here. So cheers, you are all bloody legends. And until next time, don't roll a double one on a spellcast.